Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of What If Naruto Was Trained by Anko. If you enjoy the video, then like, share and subscribe, and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and also check out my other playlist, hope you would like them too. So let's get started. Chapter 10, The Awakening. The first thing that Shino noticed about the cave system they found themselves in, after the absolute darkness that engulfed them, was the foul stench. He wasn't what the cause for the stench was, all he knew was that it was inciting his Kakashi family to even greater levels of panic. Their sheer combined instincts were almost overwhelming him, despite his attempts at blocking such feelings. Shino was so lost in thought that the sudden, snapping sound that filled the air made him jerk. Seconds later, his eyes stung as a faint glow filled the air. That's better. Turning his head, he found INO holding a glow stick, looking as if she didn't know whether to be angry or relieved. Putting her aside for the moment, Shino turned his attention back to the cage. The walls appeared normal and there were a few miniature stalactites and stalagmites. It appeared normal enough, but he saw no immediate exit, which prompted him to regain his feet and begin moving about searching. The light of the glow stick only extended so far, but he was reasonably sure that he could find his way out. It would be risk to move too far away from INO, which meant the best option would be to coax his Kakashi out. This proved impossible. The raw panic they felt overrode any commands he attempted, which meant he was in no better shape than INO. He amended that though quickly, remembering that she, at least, had a sword. Without his family, there wasn't much he could do. Just keeping the thousands of voices blocked off enough to allow him to function was giving him an intense headache and making it hard to think. Like, what now? Shino remained silent for several long minutes, and then turned back to face the girl. That was, indeed, a very good question. Obviously, we begin to search for a way out, since our original entrance is now blocked from us. But are we even sure there is another exit? INO asked, climbing to her feet, holding the glow stick high. I mean, like, aren't caves isolated? No, Shino answered, frowning, though she couldn't see that. In all honesty, he knew very little about caves, but what he did know was that they honestly didn't have many options. He was more than willing to concede that entering the cave was not a good idea. Oh, INO responded before her jaw tightened. Then what are you standing there for? I was merely waiting for you, Shino responded, arching an eyebrow before turning back to the cave and the problem set before them. Shaking his head, Shino moved forward, pleased to see the light following him, which illuminated the far wall, where he discovered a narrow gap in the rock. Is that the way out? INO asked anxiously from behind him, hovering just behind his shoulder. I am not sure, Shino answered, already thinking of how best to find out. If his family had been willing, he would have sent one of them, but they weren't, so he had to think of some other way to find out. Lowering his gaze, he spotted a rock, just the right size, and something clicked in his head. Stooping, he selected the rock and then tossed it, listening intently. If the passage was a dead end, then it would hit the wall, but if it wasn't. Seconds later, the sound of a rock clattering to the earth reached them. Well? INO prompted impatiently. Shino remained silent, considering the various odds as best he could, and then nodded reluctantly. We has no other choice. That said, he turned sideways and squeezed into the gap, followed seconds later by a grumbling INO. It was a strange sensation for Shino. He felt like was constantly in danger of being crushed, always in danger of his own panic adding to the panic of his Kakashi. He also noticed the gap was beginning to slope downward. It was slight, but it was definitely there. Down, down and down it went, until finally it widened to a full-sized tunnel that allowed Shino and INO to walk side by side. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the tunnel forked, and they were forced to stop. Okay, so now what? INO muttered, staring between the two separate tunnels before glaring at him. Well, without exploring both tunnels, I cannot say for certain, Shino answered, studying both intently. Well, why not just whip out those bugs of yours up and get them to look? INO snapped. I can't, Shino responded calmly, moving towards each tunnel, attempting to find the correct path. They are too caught up in their sheer panic. It is all I can do to keep their fear and panic from swamping myself. Damn it, INO muttered, shooting him a nasty glare before pointing randomly at the tunnel on the left. Then we should go that way, if you can't figure things out. Shino paused and then raised an eyebrow curiously. Why that tunnel? INO, snorting, pushed past him, leading the way. Your hair. It's moving to the right. So, That means a breeze has to be coming from the left. Which denotes air, Shino supplied, following behind her, nodding to himself. Maybe he didn't have to worry so much. Ino wasn't sure how long they had been down there, hours, maybe, but what she did know was that she hated it. She had several reasons to hate it, too. First, she had a mild case of claustrophobia, then of course, there was the fact that they were beginning to run out of glow sticks and solid pills. Added to this was the unknown stench that was filling the tunnels and, perhaps most importantly, the discovery of cocooned forms glued to the walls. Every time she thought about that, Ino shivered, her imagination trying to relay what it would feel like to be so helpless and dying slowly. To know at first what was happening, to feel something drinking your fluids before your heart and lungs finally gave out. To make matters worse, Ino's imagination kept picturing Naruto going through the same thing, which was enough to sicken her completely. Glancing at Shino, Ino studied him intently, wondering how he was holding up. After they had discovered those cocooned bodies, it had taken a firm shove from Ino to get him moving again. It was almost like the longer they were in the tunnels, the worse the panic became for him, not that she could tell from his expressions or body language. If she wasn't sharp and careful, Shino would freeze and get them killed, and not the first time. Ino wished that it had been Shino that had died and not Naruto. She had seen how he reacted to these things. Naruto hadn't been intimidated at all, and best of all, he would talk to her to keep the silence from overwhelming them. Shaking her head, Ino shifted her attention away from Shino to study the pale light as it danced along the wall. The silence and feeling of dread was slowly growing, until it was so thick that Ino actually began to think that this was some kind of hell. Maybe it was a punishment for her misdeeds, or a wasted life. It was enough that it made her want to scream. Just as her mouth opened, and she prepared to do just that, they reached the tunnel and entered into a circular chamber where a dozen or more intersecting tunnels waited. Ino cursed under her breath, staring at each one, and then wondered which one they should take. Hell, how could she know? They weren't even able to use any of Shino's bugs to search the tunnels. Turning, she started to question the boy, only to find him glaring at something, his shoulder tense. If she didn't know better, she would have sworn he was in an argument with someone, but there was no one around to argue with. Had he finally snapped and was now plotting her death? Then, suddenly, his body relaxed and he turned his head to watch something move away, and down one of the tunnels. Oh. Shino, you okay? Ino asked hesitantly, resisting the urge to pull her sword in case he turned on her. I'm fine. Well, it looked like you were arguing with someone. I was. Shino turned to stare at her from behind those sunglasses, which she found creepy and weird. I had to shout at my family, but Chichi-chan agreed to check the tunnels for us. You mean? You got one of your bugs to go look? Ino said, blinking. Aren't they terrified or something? Yes. Which is why I could only get one of them to do this for me, Shino said before crouching down. It will take a while. There are 12 tunnels and only one of her. Ino shifted her weight uneasily, knowing that she had no choice but to wait and see what happened. Turning her mind away from the weight, Ino attempted to muse about Sasuke. This, however, seemed pointless. Did it really matter what he was doing while she was trapped in these tunnels among deadly spiders with an almost useless teammate? Ino knew the answer, but she thought about him anyway. It kept her busy. When Chichi returned, Ino stirred long enough to ask if it was time to move, then receiving a negative answer, she returned to thinking about the dark-haired boy that she had been crushing on since the first time she saw him. Ino honestly wasn't sure what it was, that silence or his aloofness. Maybe it was his looks or those dark eyes. She was still trying to figure out the source of her crush, a few minutes later, when an odd sound reached her. It echoed in the small section of tunnels. It was startling and it was horrible. A venomous hiss, followed by the sound of something large moving through the tunnel they had just came out of. Glancing briefly at a suddenly on guard Shino, Ino gulped and then turned her attention back to the tunnel, waiting for whatever was following them. Almost absently, Ino reached over her shoulder and pulled her sword, hissing from its sheath. Grasping it like the Harate Bunshine had trained her, Ino assumed the best stance she could, preparing to use the weapon. The sounds were getting closer, and Ino strained to see past the glowstick's light, but could see nothing but darkness. The sounds suddenly faded, and Ino tensed, uncertain of what to do. Ino-san, Chichi-chan says she found a tunnel that leads to something important. Ino hesitated, unwilling even to look away from the tunnel behind them. Shifting her weight and grip, she responded with an urgency she didn't bother hiding. Is it a way out? She is not saying, However, it is a possibility, Shino admitted. Ino set her jaw anxiously before she nodded and turned heading for the tunnel Shino indicated. It was narrower than any of the other tunnels she had been in, so narrow that it was actually amazing she could still breathe. Not that breathing was a pleasant task, the air was stagnant and even richer with the mysterious stench. It was only through sheer force of will that she kept moving, and kept Shino moving with her. It took several minutes, or was it hours, for Ino to realize that the tunnel was beginning to slope upwards. She just prayed it kept doing so. Up meant they were approaching the surface and, possibly, another exit. She was banking on that. She had only 2 soldier pills left, and she didn't want to have to use them before they escaped. Then, just as the glow stick faded out, she stumbled out of the tunnel and crashed painfully into something solid. Damn it! Ino hissed, then paused, listening to her voice echo. Blinking, she quickly fumbled through her hip pouch and grasped her last glow stick. Snapping the plastic tube, she shook the contents, replacing the darkness with a dim light that vaguely hinted at how vast the cavern she was standing in was. Turning her attention back to what she had smashed into, she discovered a column of rock. Cursing to herself, she turned away to see what her teammate was doing. Shino, amazingly enough, had lit his own glow stick and was busy moving through the cavern as if searching for something. Hey, you shouldn't be wasting that, Ino hissed, moving over to join him, thus increasing his light. The boy ignored her, and she had opened her mouth to say something else when she noticed Shino kneeling beside an oblong white shape. Is that what I think it is? Ino asked, disgust leaking into her voice. This one seems dead, Shino said after a moment, and then he turned his head, staring at something else that their combined glow sticks only barely revealed. So that is what she found. What? Ino asked, looking in the same direction, but only saw the edge of another cocoon. Shino, however, seemed to be ignoring her once more as he hurried over to it, kneeling yet again. Chichi-chan said that the tunnel led to something important, Shino explained as he studied the object intently. I believe I have found what she meant. What the hell are you minus? Ino paused, however, watching with wide eyes as Shino sliced through tea white material with a kunai to reveal Naruto's face. He looked pale, his lips were even turning blue. Shaking herself out of the shock she felt, Ino leveled a glare at Shino, wondering why the boy had wanted to find Naruto's body. It wasn't as if they could carry it out of there. Then, Ino blanched when Shino reached out to touch the boy's flesh. What the hell is wrong with you? You shouldn't be touching a dead body. He isn't dead, Shino responded calmly, hand moving to the blonde's throat. Chichi-chan says that she smelt his chakra, and chakra can't exist in a dead body. He's alive. Ino blinked, suddenly kneeling beside Shino. Her mind was reeling at this development. She would have sworn that he was dead, after all, but Spider had dragged him underground. Yes. Barely, but he is alive, Shino answered, using his kunai to slice at the rest of the webbing as he continued talking. Obviously he has been poisoned. I think, however, that he was captured. Captured? Shino nodded, setting back slightly. Yes. The ninja controlling these spiders obviously wanted to understand his enemies better. So, the spiders captured Naruto, poisoning him so that they didn't have to keep a constant eye on him. So that means Jay'll be back, Ino guessed, glaring at Shino. What now? We can't drag him around with us. I know, was all the boy said. Well. Ino suddenly snapped, her temper rising with each minute. The boy was silent. It wasn't that she didn't like knowing Naruto was alive, or even that she didn't want to take him with her, but right now she was staring at the risk of losing her own life. I could see if my Kaikechu would be willing to draw the poison out of him, Shino finally suggested, a note of uncertainty in his voice. I am not sure how that would work, however. My father explained the basics only once. Well, we can't just leave him here now, Ino said, a hint of her exhaustion finding its way into her voice. That scared her, she was going to collapse soon, and those soldier pills were only going to make it worse. I know, Shino said after a moment, which was followed by a more pronounced silence before he released his own breath. My Kaikechu are no longer listening to me. I cannot even shout them down, so that they can hear my voice. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? Ino snapped, glaring at Shino and then looking at Naruto. She was trying to think of anything to fix this mess. Nothing was coming to mind, however. All they had were 3 soldier pills, her sword, and whatever other small weapons they still had. Ino-san, can you bring your light closer please? Shino suddenly asked, and Ino, grumbling, did as asked, glaring at the boy. Shino merely focused on Naruto for several minutes and then leaned back as if deep in thought about something. Ino ignored the grey-clad boy and turned her attention back to Naruto, surprised at what she found. His skin appeared to be regaining its color and his lips were no longer blue. Is the poison wearing off? It would appear so, Shino said softly. Ino remained silent, staring at the boy, and then remembering where she was, she glanced around anxiously. They needed to move. There was no telling when those spiders would come to repoison the blonde. Still, it was rather obvious that Shino wasn't about to leave the boy, so Ino left her glow stick next to him, and retreated ever so slightly to keep an eye out for spiders. It felt like she stood there for hours waiting for an attack that would never come. As a matter of fact, she was so intent on this imaginary attack that when Shino told her that Naruto was coming around, he yelped and jumped. Recovering, Ino quickly moved to stare down at the blonde, watching as Naruto's face twitched and shuddered. Finally his eyes opened halfway, and he stared up at them for several minutes in silence. Unnerved, Ino shifted her weight and froze, noticing the way his eyes flickered toward her. The look on his face was perplexed, almost as if he wasn't sure if he was awake or not. Am I in heaven? Naruto finally managed to croak, his eyes never leaving her face. No, Shino answered, stoic as ever. Is this hell? Naruto asked after a moment, continuing to stare at her, making Ino very self-conscious. Not quite. Shino answered, leaning back slightly. Oh, Naruto whispered before nodding, his gaze finally leaving Ino to settle instead on Shino. Then tell the pretty Kami to go away, please. That said, the blonde promptly passed out. That was odd, Shino said after a moment, his tone obviously confused. Ino nodded in silent agreement, but she felt herself blushing with the knowledge that he had been referring to her. Shino had never considered how troublesome carrying Naruto would be. After all, the boy had 2 way less than he, however, that did nothing to change the dead weight factor. The reason he was carrying the boy was really quite simple. Any time they stopped for a short break at Ino's insistence, the blonde would fall asleep, only to complain loudly when they woke him up. To make matters worse, Naruto was constantly wandering off in a daze. After a while, both Shino and Ino agreed that he should be carried so that he could sleep off whatever poison was still affecting him. It had been Shino's idea really, and for some reason Ino declared that meant that Shino had to carry him. Since Shino was not about to leave Naruto behind, he honestly didn't have much in the way of choices. However, the worst part to Shino was the utter silence in his head. His family had apparently gone so far over the bend that they had cut themselves off from him. Of course, while this could have been good news since he didn't have to constantly concentrate on blocking their panic, Shino still couldn't concentrate. He was used to the presence of his family, and without it, he was constantly distracted and unsteady on his feet. So okay, I'm starting to wonder about these tunnels, Ino said, speaking for the first time since they had decided which tunnel to take a half hour ago. Wonder what? Shino asked distractedly, wondering if it was just him or if the light of his glow stick was growing brighter. Duh. Ino snorted, glancing over her shoulder. We has been down here, like a totally long time, right? I'm starting to wonder if they actually lead to a way out or not. We are going up, Shino explained patiently. It is only a matter of time before we find a way out. I'm sure, Ino muttered, turning away to continue her silent trek along the tunnel. Shino shrugged her comment off, studying the glow stick intently. The light was definitely getting brighter, but there was no wind. That was strange to say the least. Even in the tunnels there was the occasional breeze. If there was light, there should have definitely been one. Which meant they were approaching another cavern, one that had a light source. Is it me or is the tunnel getting brighter? Ino suddenly asked, but Shino merely shrugged Naruto off his shoulders and hurried past her. Hey, what's wrong with you? Yes. It is indeed growing brighter, Shino said over his shoulder, and then pushed her to the back of his mind as he crept forward. Maybe it was just the lack of his family, or maybe he was just anxious, but Shino couldn't trust this tunnel so blindly. Reaching the end of the tunnel, he froze, staring out over a vast cavern from 10 feet above the floor. Even with his sunglasses, Shino winced, not because the torches were bright, but because he had grown so used to the glow sticks. As his eyes adjusted, he saw large dark blobs. Eventually they became vague shapes, and finally he could make out minor details. It took him a moment to realize that what he was staring at were roughly a dozen spiders, moving around in the cavern, talking in an odd language. Or at least, he thought it was a cavern until he turned his attention to the smooth walls where flickering torches resided and the equally smooth floor, which revealed that it was a man-made chamber. Frowning, he turned his attention once more to the spiders and finally allowing them to settle on a tall hooded figure standing near an opening where a set of rough-hewn stairs seemed to reside. Shino could see nothing of the man's face, nor any marks that revealed what village this man was from. Not that it mattered since, obviously, this man had to be the ninja controlling the spiders. Looking around once more for anything he missed, he paused, noticing a familiar figure kneeling between two spiders. Frowning, Shino carefully retreated back the way he came, and thankfully he didn't have to go far before he ran into INO once more. The gyral was grumbling, almost bowed beneath the weight of the unconscious Naruto. Seeing the way her eyes narrowed in accusation, he held a hand up, speaking quickly before she could. "I believe the way out is ahead. But I am not certain. Could you use your clan's ability?" "Ho." INO blinked, her anger temporarily forgotten as she eased Naruto off her shoulders. "Well, I could. But you know I'm not psychic, right? I mean, I'd have to have somebody's head to peek into, and I'm not sure I can try that on a spider." Shino nodded, reaching out to help her. "I understand. Jovi-san has been captured, so perhaps he would make the ideal target. Shouldn't we, no, try to rescue him?" INO asked, glancing at him curiously. Shino, however, shook his head, knowing the truth more easily than she did. "Even if Naruto were healthy, we would be unable to rescue him. However, if we can escape before he is murdered, we may be able to contact someone who can. But to do that, I have to peek into his head," INO said sourly before straightening up to head toward the entrance. "Oh, and Shino." Pausing, the girl turned back, a frighteningly sweet smile on her face. "If you ever make me carry him again, I'm going to get the biggest damn can of insecticide I can find." That said, the girl turned and started walking. Unnerved slightly, Shino remained where he was, unsure if he should stay with Naruto or join INO in case she needed help. If his family had still been talking, it wouldn't have taken him longer than few seconds to decide, but since they weren't, it took him several minutes before he finally hurried after INO. He had just caught up to her, and was preparing to say something when he saw something that would have sent every bug in his body into a horrified stupor if they weren't already there. It was a spider, or at least the lower portion of it was a spider. It had 8 massive legs, and a body of grey. The way it moved denoted advanced age. But what truly terrified him was the rest of the spider, which from the waist up, was an old woman's body, and it looked every inch like the ideal grandmother. Her voice was soft, unclear, but it was obvious that she was speaking to the ninja who spoke for her. "Rido-sama bids you welcome, Jovi-san. It has been centuries since the last Minato entered this hallowed den." Jovi struggled at that, and the mysterious ninja's tone became slightly mocking. "What? Has Minato Yakanatama no Jovi, the last surviving member of the Minato clan, lost his manners?" The other spiders made clicking sounds, as if laughing, but the mysterious ninja was quiet, listening to Rido as she spoke once more. Nodding, the man reached out and ripped something, probably a gag Shino guessed, from Jovi's mouth. This act was followed by the headman's loud, indignant voice. "How dare you? I am Minato. You has no right to drag me here, and treat me like some sort of animal." Rido obviously said something which the mysterious ninja nodded in agreement with. "Rido-sama says you are from the clan that betrayed us. Your clan summoned us to the world, in this foul shape, to build their power, and then, when fear grew, your clan attempted to seal us away. We has waited centuries, and then you freed us. For that, we would thank you minus." "Thank me?" Jovi interrupted furiously. "She had me dragged out of my house in the middle of the night and gagged with webbing to thank me." "Do not interrupt, Rido-sama," the mysterious ninja said threateningly. "She has suffered your continued life, only because of the service you performed in freeing her. Well then, what the hell does she want?" The mysterious ninja raised a hand, palm up, speaking calmly as ever. "As I was saying, for freeing her she would thank you. For allowing her to feed so that she could bring forth her children once more, she would thank you. However, you has brought ninja into our world, and this has caused the deaths of her children." "That wasn't my fault," Jovi shouted angrily. "How was I supposed to know that stupid Jonin would have those masked men following him?" "Regardless," the mysterious ninja said, waving a hand dismissively. "It is still your responsibility, and as such, you must restore to her the Kai, she had lost with the death of those children. What? Jovi shouted before suddenly going slack in the grasp of the spiders holding him. Shino blinked, wondering if the man had died, then remembering INO, he glanced over at her. Her body was stretched out as if she had lain down to take a nap, and he wondered about that for a split second before he realized what she had done. Mastering his body, he scooped her up and quietly slipped back into the tunnel. It would be safer, and besides, his family's silence was starting to chew at his mind. As a matter of fact, he nearly forgot what he was doing several times on the trip back to where Naruto was resting. He did make it, though, and setting INO down gently, Shino paused, wondering what to do now. It was getting harder and harder to concentrate. He just prayed it wouldn't get them all killed. Shaking his head, he settled down to wait, only to jerk at the sound of a shrieking wail that echoed from the end of the tunnel. Realizing that had to be Jovi, he quickly turned to face INO, worried that she might have not made it out of the body in time. This proved a needless worry as her eyelids fluttered open, her face twisting into a grimace. "Are you okay?" INO met his gaze. It was unsettling to say the least, but she quickly looked away, her voice trembling. "You were right, that opening is an exit. Is it guarded?" Shino asked after a moment. "By more than just the ninja and spiders we saw?" "Yes," INO grated out. 5 spiders. "I see," Shino replied before falling silent. He struggled with the various questions that were now facing him: spiders that actually were demons, an exit that was heavily guarded, a mysterious ninja. "So, now what?" INO finally asked, and Shino looked up, seeing the way she kept her face set in a scowl. "Obviously we has to slip past those spiders and that ninja down there. Possibly, if we could defeat the ninja, then we would have an easier time. Right? But like, how do we do that exactly? You know, since he's not really in control of those things." "I don't know," Shino admitted, his voice growing slightly brittle. "My Kaikeichu are not talking. Without them, I can't concentrate. I doubt I can fight in this condition." "Well then, what are we supposed to do?" INO demanded heatedly. "I can't fight those damn things even with this sword." Shino nodded, an idea tugging at the edges of his mind. He lowered his head, trying to bring it into focus, which took several long minutes, and then he realized what he had been trying to think of. "Remember what Harate-sensei told us before we left Konoha? Each of us has a strength. Mine was strategy." "Okay, but that still doesn't tell me how minus." "The how, INO-san, would be tactics," Shino said before glancing at Naruto. "He is our tactician, so he will has to tell us how best to carry out my strategy of slipping out unnoticed." "But he's unconscious," INO hissed. "Plus, even when Naruto-kun is awake he's useless." "True," Shino allowed, raising an eyebrow, noting the way she had referred to him. INO was silent for several long minutes and then sighed, turning to the blonde in question. "We don't have a choice, do we?" "No." "Fine," INO grumbled, and then, hauling back, she slapped him upside the head with enough power to knock the blonde over with a thump. "Free ramen." "Ouch." Naruto rubbed at his head, muttering curses under his breath. It was bad enough that she had smacked him, but the biggest crime was that she had taunted him with free ramen. Lowering his hand, he blinked, wondering if INO ever needed to breathe, mainly because she was still talking and wasn't showing any signs of stopping. Keeping his silence, Naruto wondered if, maybe he could go back to sleep without her noticing. No, that would only get her to hit him again. "Are you even listening to me?" INO suddenly hissed, startling him. "Yay, yay," Naruto said, knowing the next question and wondering what exactly she had been saying. "Then what did I just say?" "Oh. Something about spiders as being trapped," Naruto answered, racking his mind for more information. Lacking exact details, he gave her a hopeful smile. "Oh. And something about an old lady and a ninja." "For sweet minus," INO grumbled before jabbing a finger into his chest. "Listen, okay. We are in a spider's den, miles underground, nearly out of weapons, and the mother of all spiders is blocking the way. Shino says that we has to beat that ninja if we ever want to escape, and of course he can't fight due to his connection to those bugs of his." Naruto blinked, staring at her, and then shrugged. "Okay, and what do you want me to do? Figure out how we're supposed to beat that ninja and escape though?" INO hissed dangerously. Naruto blinked, staring at her. For a moment there she had sounded like a snake, which was funny, because he hadn't heard too many of them. Then seeing the way she was glaring at him, he scratched the side of his head, unable to fully grasp why they needed him for this. Well, INO hissed once more after several minutes. I'm thinking. Okay. Naruto snapped back, and then, while INO mumbled, he focused on what she had told him. Okay, so they were trapped by giant spiders and a ninja. So what did he remember about Kumo Aiki? Frowning, Naruto tried to remember all the stories he had ever heard when he had still been living in an orphanage. Were they the ones that ate corpses? No, those were the Vikinikai. Well, what about? No, those were the Yaramayahu. Were they the ones that liked to live in mountains and hunt children? No, those were the Tengu. Or? Naruto suddenly said, clutching at the sides of his head. Why couldn't he remember the stories about the Kumo Aiki? This meant he had bugged those bastards in the orphanage to tell him all those stories for nothing. If he couldn't remember how to beat the damned things, then what was he going to do? Then he remembered something Anko had told him back when they had first started training. You think outside of the box. Keep it up. That seemed to jumpstart his prankster streak, and suddenly he was creating a half-dozen ideas. Naruto-san, please hurry up, Shino said evenly. Gathering his strength, he used his hands to get to his knees and pushed, lifting himself upright before he looked at both Shino and INO, grinning. I have an idea. Great, INO grumbled, climbing to her feet as well. So, are you going to tell us? It's a surprise, Naruto said, grinning just a little bit larger. Kami, please don't tell me your brilliant plan is counting to 3, INO muttered. Hey. Just trust me, okay? Naruto demanded, his grin fading as he fixed his gaze on her. Fine. INO grumbled. Just try not to get us killed, there's a sale in Konoha I want to go to. Grinning once more. Naruto held up a scroll. INO eyed the scroll she was holding suspiciously, then glanced at Naruto, who was busy creating a small group of cave bunshine closer to the entrance. What the hell did he has going on in that twisted little mind of his? She couldn't even guess. Hey, what you see is what you get scroll, and an army of cave bunshine just didn't add up to a good idea that she could see. Shaking her head, she studied the scroll once more, wondering what the scroll would do. Then, she looked over at Shino, who was standing close by looking slightly lost. That was another thing that was preying on her mind. Could he really function well enough to stay with her? Yet, no matter how many times she asked Naruto, he would never tell her his plan. All he ever told her was to open the scroll and head for the exit when it was time. Time to what? INO wondered before sighing. She would just have to leave it to Naruto. After all, unclear or not, it was the only chance they had. Taking a breath, she closed her eyes and then opened them, watching as Naruto finished talking with his clones before hurrying down the tunnel to her. You ready? He was grinning again, half prankster and half cocky. INO wondered how he could manage that since she felt completely overwhelmed. Naruto-san, you do has a plan, right? Shino asked carefully. Yup. Naruto nodded seriously before glancing at the clones and then back at them, his grin growing. Trying to not get us killed. INO stared at him and then groaned. Naruto took this as a sign that she was ready and turned, rushing to his clones. Let's kick some ass. Then, all the clones let out a roar and turned, charging to the end of the tunnel, where they suddenly jumped, firing off kunai that exploded. INO blinked, listened to the sound of chaos, and then grabbed Shino's hand and took off running, as well dropping to the floor. She took a moment to study the cavern, taking in the chaos raging all around them and the various chunks of rock that were falling. So this was his plan. INO-san. Maybe we should open the scroll now, Shino said softly. Blinking, INO did just that, surprised at the slight shimmering of the air around them, then even more surprised as a spider that rushed past her completely ignored them. Turning, she opened her mouth to say something to Shino, only to freeze, finding herself facing a spider. Her brief moment of panic was quickly replaced by the realization that Naruto had used the scroll to hand them both into spiders. Suddenly, INO understood what Naruto was doing. In all of this chaos and destruction, none of the spiders would notice 2 extra spiders. Which meant the ninja wouldn't notice, meaning they could escape unnoticed. It was brilliant. A sudden nearby explosion bolted her back to what was going on, and she took off, trying to act as much like a panicking spider as possible. It was hard to keep the other spiders from crashing into her and the cave bunshine from attacking her, plus she kept checking on Shino to make sure he was following her. Thankfully, Shino seemed to be holding up well enough, or at least his hand hadn't crumbled and he was keeping pace with her. Still, it seemed to take forever to get near that exit, mostly due to chunks of the ceiling falling all around them, but they were getting there. Slowing suddenly, INO dodged a spider hurrying in front of her, which allowed Shino to pull ahead. Hurrying to catch up, INO prayed that nothing happened to put them in real jeopardy. That was when she was forced to stop once more as Shino collided with another spider. INO glanced at the exit. It would be so easy to just keep going and leave him, but could she do that? Cursing, she allowed her own hand to crumble and rushed forward, grasping Shino and yanking him up as the spider he had crashed into was rushing at them. INO felt a tremor of fear race through her, and then something else took over, prompting her to perform 3 unexpected feats. First, she channeled chakra into her legs for a boost as she jumped, pulling Shino with her. Second, INO twisted in the air until she was vertical and unsheathed a sword while channeling chakra into it so that the blade sliced through the monster like it was butter. Then, to complete the amazing feat, she landed adroitly with a now recovered Shino. INO paused to a split second staring at the sword in awe and then took off as Shino yanked on her hand. The rough-hewn stairs of the tunnel rose steeply, and with every stride they climbed higher along the torchlit stairway. INO didn't even want to think about who had created them. All that mattered was that none of those spiders were chasing them. Maybe you're not such an idiot after all, INO said to Naruto, glancing behind her only to find the blonde nowhere in sight. Suddenly, the one flaw she had never noticed in the plan hit her. Where was he? He should have been right behind them, or at least a few minutes, but she didn't feel like he was. Then, she heard what sounded like someone rushing up at them. So the idiot had fallen further behind than expected. Naruto, are you like? She was cut off, however, as the sound grew closer and suddenly revealed a large spider, its fangs gleaming in the torchlight. It was an instinct that did it, or at least INO thought it was instinct. One moment her sword had been at her side, and the next it was plunging through the monster's head. It let out an almost deafening screech and tumbled backwards into the darkness. INO stood transfixed for a moment, staring after it, then looked at the sword. She was broken out of her surprise when Shino thirked on her arm, dragging her further up the stairs. We need to keep moving. What about now? INO started to protest, only to have Shino cut her off. I do not know. But he is stronger than either of us. Maybe he is trying to buy us time. INO didn't believe that, but kept her peace, feeling like a coward the entire time. He wouldn't have left either of them behind, but then again he had told them to flee, and maybe Shino was right. Maybe he was right behind them, but he was just taking his time to let them escape first. Those thoughts didn't stay for long, since her body was starting to finally completely rebel against her. This was the onset of chakra exhaustion. Oka had explained it to them often enough, and it was only because of Shino that she was even still moving. Her vision was beginning to darken, her air coming in harsh rasps. Her mind starting to slip. Then, suddenly, she collapsed, making a soft bump sound. It took her a moment to realize that she was lying on soft grass and could feel a cool breeze washing over her. They had made it. Yes. She tried to get up, but her body refused, and her lungs felt like they were filled with water. Eyes fluttering, she drifted on the edge of unconsciousness for what felt like an eternity before she felt energy flooding through her once more. After several minutes, she coughed and opened her eyes to stare up at the person kneeling over her. He was dressed in armor, a sword jutting out over his shoulder and a white animal mask covering his face. INO allowed her eyes to dart from that mask to his outfit before spotting the emblazoned konoha symbol on his armor. Who are you? Unbu. A protector of Konoha and Fire Country, the man said, his hands still glowing faintly. You are lucky that Harate-senpai found my team. Why? How? INO stuttered, watching as the man turned to face someone else before looking back at her. That is not important right now. Right now, I need to know what exactly happened. What about Harate-sensei? INO asked thickly, her thoughts jumbling now. He is fine. The village has been secured and he's resting well, the man answered her calmly. Now, tell me what happened. INO coughed, head swimming, and she began to tell him everything. She could remember the mission, the time spent underground, and then finally what she had overheard when she was searching Jovi's mind. Falling silent, she stared up at him, feeling as if she was forgetting something, but it was so hard to remember. We need to take them back to the village. For some reason that phrase triggered her memory and INO grabbed the clothes of the Anko that had healed her, jerking his attention back to her. Naruto. The man paused, then nodded. You need to rest. But minus INO started to protest, only to as the man calmly reach out and touch her neck softly, then suddenly her entire world went black. Watching as the last of the cave sunshine disappeared, Naruto cursed to himself, thankful that he could still manage the Mizaigaku. The spiders had sealed both exits, they knew he was still there, and he was the one they wanted. Crouching down against a chunk of rock that had been blasted free from the wall, he concentrated on his breath. As long as he didn't do anything stupid and remembered what Anko had taught him, he might survive long enough to figure out a solution to this new problem. He just thanked the kami that he was so used to holding still until he figured out his next move. That didn't mean it was easy. He could try to hend into a spider, but with how iffy that was at times, he didn't want to try. Leaning against the rock, he closed his eyes, wondering what he was going to do, only to wince as he felt a sharp jab in the small of his back. Sitting forward, he turned to see what had poked him, and, as he remembered a lesson from Anko, he started to grin. Grasping the rock, he applied all of his weight, snapping the jagged point off. This of course alerted every Kumo Iki to where he was, and they started swarming toward him. Cursing, Naruto glanced around to spot the ninja, who was staring impassively in his direction. Well, if he could only kill one thing, why not the damn ninja? That decided, he rushed toward the man, noting his plain face even as he allowed his Mizaigaku crumble. He dodged 3 spiders and, closing rapidly, used the heavy style to push off the ground while the makeshift rock knife arched up at the nin's chest. Just when Naruto swore that the blow was going to hit home, the man snapped his hand out and grabbed his wrist, twisting painfully. The rock knife clattered out of his hand, and Naruto grunted before lashing out with a kick to the nin's solar plexus. The mysterious nin released Naruto's wrist, inhaling sharply. Landing in a crouch, Naruto growled and then launched into another attack, only to as it dodged and countered with a jab to Naruto's face. The force of the blow sent Naruto somersaulting backwards before he smacked painfully into the rock wall of the cavern and collapsed to his hands and knees. His back throbbing, Naruto gasped in pain, raging at how the man seemed to be reading everything he did. It was like this guy had 1,000 eyes or something. Pushing himself up, Naruto charged forward, pushing off in one way on to change directions in mid-move, driving his punch into the man's chin, snapping his head back. Naruto didn't hesitate for an instant and grabbed the man's shoulder and yanked it down with all of his strength, forcing the man's face into his rising knee. The man stumbled back, dazed, and Naruto plunged ahead, heedless of the lack of damage. Leaping, Naruto delivered a hard front kick to the man's chest, forcing the man to stagger once more before smiling bemusedly. Naruto of course remained oblivious to this and just continued attacking, his attacks landing but resulting in no visible results. Landing after his latest barrage, Naruto stared up at the ninja, who was still smiling in a bemused fashion. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto prepared for yet another attack when he was forcibly reminded of the spiders. Seconds after the webbing had slammed into him, followed by 2 spiders, he was yanked into a kneeling position before the mysterious ninja. "You are a very strange child," the ninja remarked. "Screw you," Naruto shouted in response, struggling against the webbing. "Rido-sama says that your kai is quite impressive. She will be honored to receive your gift," the ninja said as if Naruto hadn't spoken at all. "What gift?" "Your kai, of course," the ninja explained calmly. "Yes, I agree with Rido-sama, your kai should be quite delicious." "Say where?" Naruto shouted, struggling at that. He didn't know what kai was, but he understood that she was talking about eating him and he really didn't want to be eaten. "Rido-sama must has kai. Otherwise, she cannot give birth to her family. Jovi-san did not provide nearly enough to quench her hunger. You, however, should do quite well." The ninja sounded pleased. "It will be nice to, as true brothers and sisters again." "What the hell are you talking about? She's just a damn spider," Naruto shouted, only to as the ninja slapped his cheek hard. Wincing, Naruto stared up defiantly at the ninja. "Do not dare to speak," the ninja shouted angrily. "Rido-sama is an ancient and powerful demon, my beloved mother. She has killed men twice your size and devoured entire villages before you were born. She has terrorized the dreams of children to generations, and the form she wears now is nothing compared to her true horrible beauty." "Okay, I get it. She's evil," Naruto said, snorting. "Still a damn spider." You insolent minus, the ninja shouted, hand rising as he prepared to strike once more when suddenly he paused, as if listening to a voice. Lowering, he nodded, turning toward a dark section of the cavern. Please, mother, show him your true glory. Naruto watched as the figure came slowly out of the shadows. Her face was nearly perfect, with lovely green eyes and rich black hair. Then, he saw the rest of her. His mind reeled, staring at those 8 legs and the body. It made a mockery of her beauty. He was so distracted that he completely forgot about struggling, just watched as she strode toward him with 8 sharp taps with each step. Behold Rido-sama, mother of all spiders. The greatest demon in the land. The ninja said, fiercely glaring at Naruto. She who has brought greatness to some and death to others. She who shall give birth to another brood, a true brood. Naruto stared up at the Kumo Iki as she came to a stop near the ninja, and when she spoke her voice was brittle and unnatural. I thank you, most brave warrior. Your Kai shall restore mind strength completely, and Monkut shall know his family once more. Naruto opened his mouth to scream, but Rido struck like lightning, her legs lifting him up effortlessly. He thrashed uselessly before crying out as she bit into his neck. A white-hot searing pain raced through him, eradicating nearly every thought in his head. It seemed to go on forever, torturing him as he died. His vision was beginning to darken. As the searing pain began to fade, and his mind slid into silence, he felt a warmth spreading through him. It was so strange, like he was dreaming as he died. He thrashed once or twice, his mind focusing briefly on fighting back, but ultimately, his mind went dark, and all that was left was that consuming heat. Then a part of him shifted, as if it was stirring from a deep slumber. It was malevolent and rage personified. It was evil and it roared. And something inside Naruto awoke. Why do we have to go back? One of 2 white-masked, black-garbed men complained. Probably because you went and said he was probably dead, his companion said blandly. Hey. You agreed with me though, Hiroko. Hiroko grunted in response, speeding up slightly. Hiroko, unlike his teammate Makoto, knew exactly why they had been sent back. It was actually almost obvious. At least it would be if Makoto paid attention to things. After all, this Naruto was Mitarashi Anko's pet project. So of course at the first hint of Naruto being alive, their captain would send them out to retrieve the boy. The only real question in Hiroko's mind was if the blonde was still alive or not. Considering what this genin team had been fighting, he doubted it. After all, it was obvious that Kumo Iki, if they really were those creatures, were well beyond genin. Hiroko, hey, slow down will you? Makoto shouted, speeding up to matching his pace once more. You should train more, Hiroko remarked tiredly. Or take up teaching. Hey, stop taking it out on me, okay? Makoto snapped, falling silent for a minute before speaking again. Do you think that girl was really telling the truth? That these are Kumo Iki? I don't know, Hiroko said, shrugging. I know that the few we fought felt different than those giant spiders in the forest of death. So, maybe they are what all those old stories based the Kumo Iki on. Either way, these genin did very well in surviving inside their den. Yeah, I can see why Harate-senpai is wanting to enter them in the Chunin exam, Makoto said. Though, if he is dead, then jail be one man short again. And a censor, Hiroko said with dark humor. Remember, this Naruto is really Anko-senpai's student. I imagine she'll be upset if he's dead. Oh yeah, Makoto sighed, shaking his head. I had forgotten that. But, if he's alive, Hiroko said, taking the lead once more. I can't wait to see him fight Itaki-san's brother. Hey. That's right. That fight should be awesome, Makoto said, brightening as well. I'll put 20 ryo on him. Naruto or Sasuke? Makoto mused as they finally cleared the trees and landed in the same clearing that they had arrived in about 6 hours ago. Naruto. Again, if he survived. Okay, I'll take the bet, Hiroko said, scanning the area carefully. I doubt Itaki-san will let his brother be that poorly trained. Oh. But Anko-senpai is going to really push him. Makoto responded, slipping his kusarigama from its pouch and nodding at the entrance that was almost hidden in the rock face. I'll go first. Nee. Yeah, Hiroko agreed, slipping his sai from their holsters carefully, following his teammate into the entrance. He was put off slightly by the odd feeling he was getting the further they went into this darkening tunnel. Hiroko quickly lost sense of time. The further they went, the more it felt like it was never going to end. Hey, this is strange, Makoto said, crouching down to check on something. What is it? Blood, Makoto said, his tone dubious. At least, I think it is. Looks a bit green. Remember that girl claimed she stabbed one of them, Hiroko said, shaking his head, studying the liquid as well, happy that for once their masks actually worked like they were supposed to, allowing them to see in the dark. HN. Here I thought she was just trying to impress us, Makoto muttered before continuing downward, both being very careful not to make a sound. Finally, after what felt like hours, they came to the semi-hidden entrance and, with speed only granted to Anbu, they darted inside, expecting a fight. Sweet Kami, Makoto hissed, stopping suddenly. Hiroko agreed, looking around in awe. Instead of giant spiders waiting to pounce or enemy ninja, what they found was total desolation. The walls, floor and ceiling were covered in that same green liquid as in the stairway. There were large chunks of rock all over the place and, most frightening of all, was the lingering sense of a killing intent. This is, Makoto whispered, looking around intently. That is a killer intent I'm feeling, right? What's left of it, Hiroko confirmed, moving slightly to the left, looking around curiously. It had to be unusually intense for us to still be able to feel it. What about that chakra? Unusual, Hiroko agreed again, motioning for them to split up. Moving as noiselessly as possible, they searched the cavern, careful to note the total lack of bodies. Just blood, killing intent and lingering chakra. Meeting in the center, they looked around and then at each other. Is it me, or does this place feel almost like a tomb? Makoto said, his tone uneasy. It does, Hiroko confirmed, nodding toward a large smear of greenish blood leading from a man-sized hole in the wall. Did you notice that? Turning, Makoto glanced at what his partner had noted, then nodded slightly. Yeah. Scary that a genin could do this. I know. Hiroko glanced at his teammate, then around at the cavern. Did you find his body anywhere? No. Makoto muttered, crossing his arms. I'm not sure if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Okay, one step at a time, Hiroko said, twirling one of his sai expertly. We've confirmed that Team Hawate completed the mission and that Azume Naruto slaughtered an entire group of giant spiders and at least one assumed Jonin-ranked ninja. We has no idea where his body is, Makoto sighed. Right, so it's search time. You take the left, I'll take the right. Check, Hiroko agreed, and both Anbu separated, taking their respective sides of the cavern, and began searching. Unlike they had at first, they actually paid attention to the cavern, looking for a body. The initial surprise at such a large amount of destruction had overridden common sense. After all, it was not every day you got to see handiwork of this caliber from a genin. Anko really was a better teacher than he had thought. Shit. Now this meant that if he wanted any chance at Sasuke winning, he'd have to train him alongside Itaki. These just how strong was Naruto. Shaking his head, he squatted, lifting a large rock and almost hoping to see an broken body, but found nothing. Standing, he looked around, wondering where the boy could have been. Hey, I found him. Makoto shouted, and Hiroko turned, darting toward the other man. The Anbu in question was kneeling over the battered and bruised form of a blonde-haired child with strange whisker marks. His clothes looked horrible and his face was pale, but it was obvious that he was alive. Unconscious, but alive. Is it chakra exhaustion? Makoto ran a glowing blue hand over the boy for a moment, then shook his head. Well, he is low on chakra, but it's not deadly. That's funny. What is? Makoto looked up, and Hiroko could imagine the confused look on the man's face despite the mask. Well, his body's already healing itself. It's moving slowly. But it's just strange. Probably a bloodline, Hiroko said, shrugging dismissively. Let's get him out of here. Yeah. He's okay to move and I'll keep an eye on him just in case, Makoto said, putting his weapon up before collecting the boy and standing. Don't suppose I could make it 100 Ryle now, ho? Not on your life, Hiroko responded dryly, turning to lead the way out of the cavern. Spoil sport. Idioto. The man watched the samurai intently from his hiding spot, knowing that soon he would have to act, but hesitant to actually do so. He had spent a week studying the patrols. He knew the layout of the estate to the last detail. Still he hesitated. The sheer numbers only ensured that this was a suicide mission, but he had no choice. It was his mission. As the current patrol disappeared around the far corner, he made his move, darting toward the outer wall and jumping it silently. Landing adroitly, he took a moment to look around at the garden, savoring its tranquil beauty, and then he darted forward once more. Not a single blade of grass was disturbed in his passive, and soon enough he was at the limestone inner walls. Kneeling, he quickly slipped his foot spikes into place and then satisfied did the same with his hand claws. He could not risk the use of excess chakra needed to climb. Nodding, the man jumped his spikes, finding a tenuous purchase, and then he was climbing. Seconds later he cleared this final wall and landed on the inner courtyard, hidden among the swirling shadows. Holding his breath, he crouched, watching as a group of 3 samurai strode past in conversation. Once the path was clear, he darted along and then slipped through the first window he found. Pausing long enough to remove the climbing tools, he stood, taking in the corridor. Eyes adjusting to the dim candlelight, he hurried down the hallway, careful to use the stealthy step, ducking into an alcove, as yet another group of samurai passed on a patrol. Frowning, he watched them intently, uneasy now due to the unexpectedness of it. There was supposed to be no guards making a patrol in this part of the mansion for several hours. Tensing, he waited until he was sure they were gone and that nobody else was going to follow, then moved out into the hallway and hurried forward. He made the rest of the trip in peace, stopping at the last corner, aware that he was now facing the most dangerous part of his mission. Slipping a mirror out of a pouch, he peeked around the corner, carefully to ensure that the samurai was exactly where he should have been. Satisfied, he returned the mirror to its proper location and prepared himself. Straining, he heard the samurai yawn, and second later he had embedded a kunai into the samurai's skull while darting forward to catch the body, and let the dead samurai slump gently. Easing the samurai to the ground, the man paused, retrieved his kunai and then eased the door open to cross the empty space beyond. Moving quietly, he hurried forward, ignoring various doorways until at last he paused at one that seemed utterly innocent. No different than any other door in the mansion, but he knew that it was his final obstacle on his mission. The kunai slid into his right hand silently as he knocked in the coded pattern known to a select few. He paused, listening to the answering knock, and then responded yet again, speaking quietly. "I has urgent dispatches for Kasivi-sama." The door swung open and the man lunged forward, his kunai slashing through the first samurai's throat, and then burying itself into the second of the guards, a slight twist and out again. He was moving before they hit the ground, pushing through the door into an inner. Everything was going perfectly. Spotting the desired shovi, he applied chakra to his feet and shot across the anteroom, tearing through the door and lunging for the sleeping figure inside. Kunai gleaming, he plunged it toward the figure's chest, only to has it deflected by a gleaming katana. Retreating, the man paused, studying the samurai that was standing between him and his target. The man was average height and build, the typical red and black uniform of fire samurai. It was seeing those blue eyes and the white hair that alerted him to the identity of his newfound foe. Shinta, formerly of the Konoha hunter Nin S. Shinta shifted his sword slightly, his voice firm. "Though you wear that mask, I know you. Katsumoto of the Konoha Unbu." Katsumoto lunged at that, ducking the first slash at his neck, knowing that he was in over his head. Blow after blow was exchanged with the former hunter Nin, each time making it clear that Shinta was not going to allow this attack. Still, Katsumoto could not abandon this mission. It had to be seen through to the end. Then seconds after a brutal exchange left him unarmed, the Unbu knew his final option was at hand. The samurai charged in once more, and Katsumoto timed it perfectly, slipping inside to grab the man's robes and arm while falling backwards. It wouldn't stop the man, but it was enough for the man to have time to his final effort. For unity. That shouted Katsumoto began flashing through a series of hand seals for his special attack, staring at the recovering Shinta almost placidly. The Unbu saw the sword suddenly slashing through the air, and he had just enough time to realize he was still too slow. After that, his head was sailing through the air and his jutsu died unfinished. Chapter 11: The Forbidden Mission. The Sandaime sighed, staring out the window behind his desk at the village. He could remember finding the Nidaime doing that a lot toward the end, just staring and staring. Was it something about this office or job that slowly sucked the life out of a person? Or was it the fact that those who earned this job were not the type suitable to being trapped behind a desk? The Shodai and Nidaime Hokage, as far as the Sandaime could remember, had been more at home in a fight than pushing paperwork. The Yondem had been the same way, though he was the only Hokage that had ever managed to escape the tediousness of the job. In some ways, the Sandaime hoped that Naruto would never succeed in his dream. It would not be fair to trap so similar a ninja in this situation. Of course the Sandaime mused silently. He also hoped with all of his heart that the boy could pull it off. If for no other reason than to tick off those doddering idiots on the council. Shaking his head, the Sandaime turned back to his desk and the scroll stretched out before him, his eyes sweeping over the message once more. It was a 3-day-old message from the daimyo, but just reading those words again made the Sandaime wince. The storm on the horizon was approaching faster than he had expected and he was unsure of how much longer he could keep things calm. At least he now had the UNBU actively searching for Freya or Tsunade. He had made it quite clear to Kakashi that they had to be found immediately. Still he felt something gnawing at his heart, telling him that neither one would be found soon enough. He prayed that he was wrong, or growing pessimistic, but with his already failing health declining rapidly, the Sandaime couldn't just dismiss such a feeling. Sighing, he put such concerns aside and picked up his pipe, studying it intently, wondering if he should indulge or not. Would it really matter? He was saved from making such a decision when the door to his office opened, followed by the familiar and confident gait of Kakashi. So, I has received several reports, Kakashi responded, closing the door behind him before approaching the desk. Nodding, the Sandaime motioned with his free hand for the UNBU commander to go ahead, then leaned back in his chair as Kakashi put his replacement book away. "Ah, that reminds me, has Anko-chan returned your book yet?" "No," Kakashi almost growled, by narrowing dangerously. Stifling his laughter, the Sandaime avoided the fuming ninja's glare. Personally, he found it hilarious that not only had an upstart genin stolen Kakashi's book from under his nose, but that Anko had made it a point of teasing him with said book. Even more hilarious was the fact that for some strange reason, all the other copies of that particular book within Konoha had disappeared. "It's not funny," Kakashi finally said, his tone almost pleading. "The publisher has no clue as to when the next book will come out, and the book 1M reading now is severely lacking in such areas." "Yes, of course," the Sandaime chortled before regaining control of his humor. Sighing, Kakashi shook his head, muttered something about the Sandaime not understanding fine literature, then changed subjects. Shinta-san sent a report that his latest search party managed to track the remaining UNBU responsible for the attack on the daimyo to Fushimi. "I've already handed Anko-san her orders along with all the details available." "Excellent," Sandaime said, anxious to at last have some worthwhile information on this unity. There had been rumors for years, but little if any real information. Even their name had been hidden until the attack on the daimyo, which was also the first time that they had ever actually committed such an act. The Sandaime could only thank Benzai 10 that not only had the fire daimyo accepted that the UNBU involved were not under the Sandaime's personal orders, but also for the chance to gain a new source of information. Shaking it off and trusting that Anko would obey all of the orders, he still hadn't forgiven him for transferring Naruto minus. He leaned back in his seat, leaving it to Kama. On the lighter side, Kakashi continued after a moment. "Jolso-san has received final confirmation for the number of participating genin in the upcoming Chunin exam." "Oh. So, how many do we has coming?" Sandaime asked, finally lighting his pipe. 144 participants, Kakashi answered, glancing out the window. "That's 48 teams total, which is a marked increase from the last exam." "Oh," Sandaime said, eyes narrowing as leaned forward to rest his elbows on his desk. "How many teams were there last year, again?" 29. "It appears that Kusa is anxious to increase its number of Chunin," Kakashi said dryly, glancing at the Sandaime. "All eligible non-rookie Konoha ninja has been nominated. All that's left are the 3 new teams. I wonder how many of those will participate." Sandaime mused, scratching at his chin before blowing a smoke ring. "Kurenai-san has repeatedly assured me that her team is ready for the exams. To quote, 'I have the utmost confidence in my team. I dare your examiners to try and break them.'" The Sandaime chuckled, before blowing a large smoke ring. But Kurenai-chan is getting quite cocky." "Oh yes. Ibikai has already assured me that he will take that challenge," Kakashi said, chuckling as well. "Yuke has also told me that she received word that Harate is confident in his team as well, especially with the addition of that boy." The way he said boy made it quite clear what the UNBU commander thought about Naruto. "What of Asuma's team? They should be ready for the exam as well," the Sandaime said, changing the subject to avoid laughing at the man. "Skill-wise, Asuma says they are more than ready. They are the best team he's ever seen, but they lack motivation," Kakashi said after a moment. "Hinata-san appears to has a desire to change herself and thus to take the exam. However, she is not the type to push others. Which means that Shikamaru won't motivate himself, and since Jovi follows his lead, there is little chance they will take this exam. I see, the Sandaime mused, blowing several more smoke rings. He would have liked all 9 to attempt it, but if they lacked the motivation, they would only hurt themselves in the long run. So, we'll have a total of 50 teams with teams 7 and 10. Yes, Kakashi answered, by dropping slightly. That should make things go faster, at least, the Sandaime finally said in dismissal. I agree. Also, Kusa does seem to be preparing for something, but it's very well hidden. Awa, however, is making it very obvious that they want the head of the Kazekage's son, Gaara. Oh. Yes, apparently Gaara was part of a team that was hired to assassinate the Rock Daimyo's grandchild. Kakashi shrugged, making it obvious that he had nothing else on the reason why such an order would be given. To be on the safe side, I've moved several UNBU special operations closer to both countries' borders for training exercises. Good. I'll start redirecting some of our Jonin missions toward those areas as well, the Sandaime said, setting his pipe aside to the moment. For some reason, the fragrant flavor was turning bitter in his mouth and distracting him, which was not a good thing. Now what about my wayward students? That, I'm sad to say, is like trying to catch the wind, Kakashi said tiredly. Tsunadeheim, despite massive gambling debt, has eluded all means of locating her. The same holds true for Thraya-sama, despite being quite the prolific author, he has somehow completely fallen off the face of the earth. I has confidence in your UNBU, Sandaime said after a moment while grinning. Then a wicked idea hit him, one that would undoubtedly force the man to step up the search. I guess this means I will has to hand over the title of Hokage to someone else. Yes, somebody that truly wants the job. Sandaime continued, his tone serious. Somebody young, maybe with blonde hair and blue eyes. Or you, I mean you do met all the criteria for Hokage. I will find them, Kakashi suddenly said, cutting the Sandaime off. Smiling, the old man watched as Kakashi produced his replacement book and left the office in a hurry. When the door was shut, the Sandaime started laughing. Upon seeing the massive gates of Konoha, Naruto wanted to weep. Okay, that was an exaggeration, but he was definitely happy to see them. After all, once he was back inside those walls, he would be free of Ino's bitching, Shino's annoying silence, and Hayat's aggravating cough. Of course, even more importantly, once he was back in Konoha, he would be able to do the one thing he desired above everything else: he could eat his precious ramen. His mouth watered at the prospect, his stomach even rumbled in agreement. 10 number 5s, 3 number 4s, and of course a Hokage-sized serving of his favorite miso ramen. Baka! Ino suddenly shouted, slapping him upside the head. Everyone else is already inside. What are you doing standing out here, daydream? Oh my god, are you drooling? Ino suddenly began wiping her hand against her leg wrappings. Www. What the hell are you hitting me for? Naruto shouted, rubbing at the side of his head, completely missing the look on Ino's face. You were daydreaming and drooling. So what? Naruto shouted back, then pulling an eye down, stuck his tongue out at her. Least I don't has bloodshot eyes like some drunk. What? Ino shouted, shaking a fist at him threateningly. Harate-sensei explained, that's from the soldier pills. Whatever, Naruto muttered before walking away from the angry girl while ignoring the bewildered and in one case perturbed gate guards. He believed her, but he just enjoyed pissing her off. Hell, on the entire way back, she had treated him semi-decently. He suspected that was mostly due to the fact that he had saved all their asses and she was too tired to really make an issue out of his annoyances. Coming to a stop, just inside the gates, he stretched, eyeing an even sicker than usual minus-looking Harate. Silently, he wondered if he would ever be normal again, but then he remembered Ino and her return to normal halfway back to the village. That was when he noticed that Shino was nowhere to be seen, which worried him slightly. They were on the same team after all. Oi, where the hell is Shino? He had to see his father, Hayate answered, his voice raspy. I told him to go on ahead. So, now what? Naruto finally asked, double-checking that he was now free to pursue his ramen. Are we getting another mission or training? No, I'm going to file a report with the Hokage, Harate said before coughing into a rag. Ino, remember noon at the training area? Yeah, Ino said nervously, as she finally joined them. Harate nodded in response and then, without another word, disappeared in a puff of smoke. Casting a glance at a distracted Ino, Naruto shrugged, put his hands behind his head and started off, guessing correctly that he had nothing to say to the girl. Besides, his ramen was calling him. And just where do you think you're going? Naruto stopped, turned and blinked, staring at the girl, wondering why she had her arms crossed and her hip cocked like that. Oi! Why the hell should I tell you? Because, I want to go shopping, Ino said simply, as if that answered everything. And? Naruto questioned, waving his hand blandly. Go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. First of all, I need someone to carry my bags, Ino replied, closing the gap between them. Second of all, you are the only one still here. So. Naruto crossed his own arms, preparing to leave. Third, I'll buy you ramen if you come shopping with me. Naruto hesitated. Normally, there was no possible way Ino could get him to go with her. However, this was ramen, and not just any ramen but free ramen. To say that he was torn was an understatement. After all, he would be shopping with Ino, but free ramen. Ino seemed to guess at his reluctance, and she gave him a sly smile. I'll even make it miso ramen. Naruto froze, staring at the girl in surprise. Never in a million years would he have expected her to use his weakness in such a fashion. Hell, he was utterly surprised by the fact that not only had she listened to him talk about his favorite ramen, but remembered. Miso ramen. Naruto finally stammered weakly, mouth-watering. Free miso ramen. Ino corrected proudly. Oh okay. Naruto muttered, unable to turn down such an offer. Part of him cursed at the fact that he had been utterly defeated by the chance at free noodles. Then of course that part remembered this was free miso ramen and it promptly shut up. 20 minutes later, Naruto found himself walking into his 6th high-end clothing store, wondering why she needed him to carry her bags if she wasn't buying anything. Trailing after Ino, he felt the now familiar cold glares that were sent his way, knowing already that they were for his gauntlet wearing orange. Shaking his head, he caught up to Ino, who was surrounded by jackets. Oi, can you hurry up? Naruto muttered, glaring at one of the jackets as if it had offended him. Give it a rest, Ino responded, running a sleeve through her fingers. Shopping isn't just selecting things that look nice, you have to hunt. You have to find just the right material, silk or cotton, make sure it's not too soft but not too firm. You have to make sure you know if it's tumble dry or not. They're just clothes. Naruto shouted, throwing his arms up in exasperation. For the love of Kami, just pick something already. What's your childhood trauma? Ino snapped, glaring at him. This is important, okay? Like, selecting the perfect flower. Ugh. Naruto tugged at his hair and then paused, noticing something about the jackets she was looking at. Blinking, he studied them, then frowning realized that she had looked at the same type in all the other stores as well. Hey, wait a minute. Why the hell are you looking at these? Ho. These. Naruto said, gesturing at the jackets, wondering if she was shopping for who he thought she was. They're guy jackets. If you're trying to buy that idiot Sasuke minus. First off, Barker, Sasuke-kun isn't an idiot, Ino said, cutting him off as she selected a jacket. And second, I'm not shopping for him. Oh. Naruto paused, then blinked. Then who? You, Ino sighed, turning as she held out a jacket to judge it against him. What? I can't stand orange. And you need a new jacket, Ino replied matter-of-factly, putting the jacket up while selecting another one. I decided that, if I have to spend who knows how long running around with you on my team, then I sure as hell don't want to see orange. What? Naruto shouted yet again, eyes even wider. Ino wanted to rob him of his second true joy in the world. Orange is a classic. It's even the perfect color and it's like ramen. A gift from the gods themselves. Orange is an eyesore. Ino retorted, eyes narrowing. Besides which, has it ever occurred to you that, now that you're an actual ninja, you might need something that won't draw everyone's attention to you? I don't care. Naruto shouted, crossing his arms. I'm wearing orange, and there's nothing you can say or do to change that. Wanna bet? Ino questioned challengingly. You may be the strongest person on this team, but I'm Yakamana Ino and I can make your life a living hell. I could probably even get Harate to withdraw us from the Chunin exams. Naruto opened his mouth ready to respond to such a statement, then paused. It was only because of Anko that he even considered what the girl had just said. After training with that woman, Naruto was acutely aware of just how much of a living hell a female could make his life. Plus he had seen her convince Harate to do things her way once or twice, so there was the fact that he believed that if she wanted she could get him to pull them out of the exam. Damn it, Naruto muttered, glaring at her impotently. Now, then, let's see. INO said, smirking at him smugly before she turned back to the racks of clothes. Despite his apparent surrender, Naruto was actually giving serious thought on how to best escape this girl's clutches. How about this? INO asked, turning to hold up a purple jacket. Over my dead body, Naruto ground out. That could be arranged, INO responded pleasantly, then, putting the jacket up, selected a dark blue one. INO. Naruto warned. The girl ignored him, but put it back anyway before grabbing another jacket. This would work. Seconds later, she produced a solid black jacket and turned toward him, which prompted her to start blushing for some damn reason. Naruto suspected that it was because Sasuke had taken to wearing black. Excuse me, Naruto hissed, narrowing his eyes. But do I look like some goth pretty boy at you? As if you could look half as good as Sasuke-kun, INO shot back sarcastically, but amazingly kept from smacking him upside the head. It's either this or white. Oi. I told you, I'm not giving up my orange. Oh. INO suddenly brightened, holding a finger up. Now that I think of it, white would be perfect, though you might stain it. I guess that would mean you'd have to give up Ron. Naruto shouted, jumping as he pointed at her. I knew it. You're a Oni in disguise. I'll never forsake orange or Ron. The Chunin exam, INO said smugly. That was when Naruto had an utterly brilliant idea. Glancing over her shoulder, he suddenly paled, pointed and shouted the only possible thing that would allow him a chance of escape. Sasuke shirtless. Where? INO shouted, whirling around, which was of course exactly the chance Naruto needed to escape. By the time she noticed he was gone, Naruto was already on the roof and darting away. Listening to her curses, Naruto laughed. Once he was safely away from that insane girl, he slowed to a more leisurely lope along the rooftops, heading to his one true desire. The one thing that he had nearly wept with despair over how long he had gone without: sweet, delicious Ichiraku ramen. Seconds later he dropped to the street below and parted the entrance curtains to enter his favorite stand. Hey kid, what'll it be? Asked the familiar chef. The usual. And make it fast, I'm starving. Answered Naruto with a grin. It was good to be home. Weapons? Check. New jacket? Check. Ramen packs? Check. Anko smirked, surveying the small bundle on the bed. Satisfied that she had collected everything, the Jonin picked the bundle up and turned striding out of the bedroom and then through the dingy apartment, closing the door with a heavy chunk. Slipping the bundle into a hidden pouch on the inside of her trench coat, Anko considered the building. How could Naruto ever have found the place? Oh, she had no trouble believing that he could be annoying enough for an orphanage to kick out, but that still didn't explain how such a child could not only wander into such a neighborhood unaccosted, but also find an apartment. Anko did of course has a few theories, but in all honesty it didn't matter. Glancing at the Wino sleeping in the corner near the building, she sighed and with 3 rebounding jumps, was on the roofs and headed back toward the center of the village. Turning her mind away from the slums, she, instead, focused on what Hiroko and Makoto had told her yesterday. Part of her was confused about the impossibility of what they claimed Naruto had done, while the other part wanted to cackle. Either way she sliced it, however, it only firmly affixed in her mind that Naruto was everything she had been told and begun to hope for. Thus when she had heard that Hayat's team would arrive today, she had known exactly who to take as her partner to her new mission. Best of all, she was protected by orders from the Hokage himself. Reaching the area where that ramen stand he was so fond of was located, Anko dropped to the street and weaved her way through the crush of people. It was not something she was used to doing much anymore. She tended to avoid getting in the heart of crowds, but it wasn't that bad. However, when she reached the ramen stand and discovered the closed to recover from the Naruto rush sign, Anko suddenly lost her tolerance for the crowd around her. Shoving 2 men aside, she performed another rebounding jump to regain the rooftops, where she set off, at an easy pace, wondering where else the blonde would go. Well, eventually he would head home, but that would probably be after he went to all of his various hangouts. Coming to a stop, she frowned. He had never mentioned any place, but if she knew him at all, she had a good idea of where he would go after that ramen stand. Turning to her left, she started off once more, heading toward the Hokage mountain. It was actually rather obvious after all, his dream was to be Hokage. So, Where else would the blonde go after a mission in which he killed a Jonin-level ninja and several giant spiders? 10 minutes later, she left the rooftops once more and landed in the street staring up at the mountain and the metal stairs that would lead to the public landing. Darting up them, it took her only 5 more minutes to spot the vague orange blob on top of the mountain, which allowed her to pull off a sunshine and reach the top without wasting any more time. Landing, Anko took a moment to choose her words carefully, then snuck up behind the oblivious boy. "Hey, runt. Heard you were back." Naruto jerked, nearly fell, then jumped to his feet, a grin on his face. "Anko. Uck. You're not going to hug me, are you?" Anko asked, smirking. When the blonde crossed his arms and snorted, she reached into her coat, producing the bundle. "Good. Cause we has a mission and don't has time to that mushy shit." "A mission?" Naruto blinked, catching the package, as she tossed it to him. "But I just got back." "It's A-ranked and time-sensitive," Anko explained, ignoring his protest. After all, she was pretty sure he wouldn't mind going on another mission, especially if it was A-ranked. "So hurry up, get dressed and let's go." She was right. In a matter of minutes, Naruto had the bundle open, his replacement jacket on, and the replacement weapons tucked away. Grinning, he looked up at her, excitement and joy in every line of his face. "Oi, so what's the mission?" "Let's get moving first," Anko said, knowing that she might be pushing things even with orders from the Hokage. Anko was very aware of how much trouble she could get into. After all, strictly speaking, she wasn't supposed to be taking Naruto out on missions anymore. "Okay. Let's go," Naruto shouted, darting past her, and Anko grinned, darting after him. It took them several minutes to reach the bottom of the mountain, then another 20 or so to reach the nearest gates. She almost laughed at the surprised look on the guards' faces as they shot past them at high speed. "So, how was your mission with that team?" Anko finally asked after they were safely out of the village and in the forest, heading to the mission location. "Ho." Naruto blinked, then grinned, performing a Naruto-ish loop. "I kicked ass all over the place. I'm gonna be Hokage soon. Believe it." "So how did you manage to kill a Jonin-level ninja and several giant spiders?" Anko asked, keeping an eye out for anyone following them. "I don't really remember," Naruto answered, his blue eyes darting away then back at her. "I know I did it. Oh. I think I did. But I can't remember." "Oh. Well," Anko said, shrugging. In all honesty, she didn't care how he had done it, only that he had done it. After all, that proved his strength, and that was the important thing. So, you said this was a super important mission," Naruto shouted a minute later, double timing it to keep pace beside Anko. "It is," Anko allowed, glancing at him with a smirk in place. "See, the fire daimyo is making his annual state visit of the country." "Ho. So, what's the big deal?" Naruto asked, blinking in curiosity. "Well, during his visit to Idioto, there was an assassination attempt." Anko gave the blonde a curious glance, noticing his surprise. "What makes this so important is the man who attempted to assassinate the daimyo Katsumoto of Konoha. What?" "Keep your voice down," Anko growled, pleased to note the look he gave her. "Now then." The daimyo was understandably upset and, after a lot of things you don't even want to hear about, started searching for Katsumoto's partner Susan. And Susan of course killed several samurai and managed to escape to a small village called Fushimi, which will take us about a week to reach. Anko shook her head, voice growing serious. "A week?" Naruto blinked, frowning. "The Chunin exam." "You'll be back in plenty of time," Anko said dismissively. "This is a different type of mission than you're used to. See, the samurai can't forcibly take the village due to the villagers. Even if they could, Susan has gathered a few missing genin together, so that would mean a suicide mission." "So, our mission is what, exactly?" "My mission is very simple. Since I know Susan and how he fights, I'm to enter the village and capture him," Anko explained, smirking. "As for your mission, all you need to do is handle the genin. Of course, if I were you, I'd treat this like a Chunin exam." "Ho. Why?" "This is the sort of mission Chunins sometimes get assigned. So, it's a perfect warm-up for you," Anko explained, waving her hand dismissively. "It's a judgment call on what you do with the genin." "Oi. What the hell do I do, then?" Naruto shouted. "Oh no, that's up to you. However, Since this is an high-priority A-ranked mission, you get to use whatever means you deem necessary. Anko grinned, glancing at him, sure that he would like what was coming next. Including the jutsu I'm going to teach you before we reach the village. Really? Naruto asked, eyes lighting up at the thought of learning new jutsu. Yep. Futon Day Topper, an extremely powerful wind attack. Anko smiled sweetly. It's one of the most practical techniques available, especially for you. Ho. Remember that paper I had you hold and split with your chakra on the way back from Kusa? Anko asked absently, wondering how best to explain herself. Well, even he had to know about chakra types, it was a basic concept after all. It told me that your chakra type is wind-based, which is really good. Means you're best suited for fighting and makes wind-based jutsu stronger in your hands. Wind-based. Naruto echoed blankly. Anko gritted her teeth, glaring at him, unable to believe that he could have been so stupid. You really did sleep through the academy, didn't you? She asked scathingly, unable to help it. Seeing his frightened look, she snorted, forcing her frustration aside to the moment. Each ninja has a tendency toward a certain element, fire and wind being the most dominant in combat types. Which means... It means, Anko grated out, her urge to hit him over the head growing stronger, that if a normal day topper can level 20 or 30 trees, then if you use it with your affinity for wind jutsu, it'll level 3 times that amount. Wow. Yay, should come in handy during the tune-in exams, Anko remarked, pleased that he finally seemed to understand. Honestly, he was so thick-headed sometimes that she wondered if he had eaten a lot of paint chips as a kid. Yes. I'll be kicking ass and showing everyone how strong I am now. Naruto shouted excitedly, adding a spiral to his jump. Maybe, but first you gotta learn it, Anko said, glancing at him dangerously. Just try not to get yourself killed. Oi, I'm gonna be Hokiv. I won't die until then. Naruto said loudly, glaring at her. Good. We'll start training when we stop for dinner. Until then, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. Bar. Shino found his father as always sitting quietly in the Abeim family training grounds. Actually, as his father had explained once before, it wasn't a typical training area. Other training areas were designed and built for combat practice. For the Abeim, it was designed to build a stronger connection with their chosen partners. Coming to within a few feet of the silent older man, he stopped, not saying a word or moving. It seemed to stretch on forever, until finally his father turned to him, speaking in his familiar tranquil tone. Can you hear them yet? Shino remained silent for several long minutes, then nodded slightly. Yes. They ignore me, but I can hear them. Good. Shibi said, looking at a bug that was fluttering up from a piece of old wood. Hyun says that you are curious about something. Why do they react like this? Shino asked, putting his hands in his pockets. They has never reacted like this to any other creature. Kumo Aiki could not cause this. There is a precedent to their reaction, Shibi said slowly, as if measuring what he was saying. 12 years ago, when Konoha fell under the wrath of the beast, he drove nearly all Abeim insane, and caused our Kakashi to turn on us. He was a demon, but how could he have such an effect on our family's connection? Shino asked quietly, head tilting forward slightly in thought. Even with the voice of his family returned, their continued revection of him severely hampered his thoughts. He knew it was an obvious answer, but he could not quite put his finger on it, which caused a finger to twitch slightly. The beast also drove the Inuzuka hounds into uncontrollable rages, and those that were foolish enough to attempt to enter a beast-like state became berserkers. Shino frowned, then felt his eyes widen, before he looked up at his father. It was obvious now, the Inuzuka had been the key to him. He was even willing to bet that the Hyliga, or Uchiha, were also affected if he was correct. It is because the dogs and our Kakashi can in a way see the true nature of things. The beast was the lord of demons. He existed as both natural and unnatural, as all demons do. It is not unexpected that, if we could only barely sense its true nature, that the Inuzuka dogs and our Kakashi, who see reality far more clearly than we do, would react in such a manner. So other clans were affected as well. Yes. Shibi said, turning away slightly. All things that could perceive the true nature of the beast or touch its mind were affected. Shino nodded slightly, thinking over everything he had learned. Now that he understood the reason for his family's reaction, he could concentrate on re-establishing a dialogue with them. To do that, however, would mean that he would have to skip team meetings, especially if he wished to be ready for the coming exam. I have spoken with Harate-san, his father suddenly said, turning completely, as if to walk away. He agrees that it would be best if you took this time to recover. Thank you, Shino said, watching his father walk away silently. Alone, Shino turned his attention to the training grounds, walking to his favorite location beneath an overturned tree. Settling in, he took a deep breath and then closed his eyes, considering how best to go about this. Mentally shrugging, he sighed, speaking to his family quietly. I'm listening, he said, then prepared for a long wait. That stupid Virk, Ino muttered to herself, pushing her way through the forest, heading for the training grounds. There was no denying that Ino was angry, mostly because she had been outsmarted by Naruto. How could she have fallen for such an obvious trick? Honestly, how likely was it that Sasuke would be shirtless in a store? Ugh, that was so totally wrong. Shutting that aside and promising retribution, she turned her attention toward the reason why Harate had told her to meet him here. Despite asking him to teach her kenbutsu after they had recovered from their various ailments, he had yet to tell her whether he would or not. He refused to let her even handle his sword anymore, which was annoying since Ino had begun to feel almost naked without it. Still, it looked promising, which was why she had made it a point to check with her father to see if he was okay with it. He hadn't been thrilled, but he supported her decision if she truly felt she needed to know it. He had, however, insisted that she continue practicing the family jutsu, mainly as he had told her while smiling, because that way when I eventually has grandchildren you can teach them. As if Ino said to herself, stepping into the training area. There was no way she was ever going to as a kid. Then again, her mother said that every girl felt that way at her age. Looking around curiously at the area, she wondered where exactly Harate was. Glancing at her watch, she frowned. It was exactly noon. Sighing, Ino walked over to a training post and sat down, unsure of what to do until the man arrived. Seconds stretched into minutes, and minutes seemed to stretch into hours. Ino, feeling restless, turned her eyes to her surroundings. Then she reached out and scraped a patch of ground beret of pine needles and leaves. Selecting a nearby twig, she scratched Sasuke's name in the dirt, sighing almost wistfully. What chances did she have, in all honesty? Sakura was already on his team, but they were getting closer was inevitable. Ino was almost willing to bet that Sakura had the Uchiha wrapped around her little finger. Sakura was not stupid, nor was she ugly. Which meant, looking at her prospects for actually winning Sasuke's affections, there was no chance outside of Sakura losing total and complete interest in Sasuke. Ino had to laugh at that impossibility. Sakura was obsessed with the boy, there was no other word for it. Other girls could admit that there were other cute guys around, Sakura didn't. It was almost frightening at times, now that Ino thought back on her academy days, at how fixated Sakura actually was. Looking down at the name etched in the dirt, she sighed and scratched it out. There are two kinds of shinobi, no matter what village they belong to. Jerking, Ino stared up at Harate, who was crouching on a training post, an odd bundle underarm. The man coughed into his rag, and then gave her a surprisingly intense gaze. What? There are two kinds of shinobi, Harate repeated, his eyes never leaving her face. The first kind are those called geniuses. The second kind are those I call artists and others call hard workers. Oh. What's the difference? Ino asked, deciding to keep her urge to berate the man for being late in check for the moment. On the surface, there isn't one, both are deadly accurate and precise, Harate explained before he jumped off the training post and crouched in front of her. Fundamentally, however, they differ a great deal. Ino nodded, watching as Harate set the bundle under his arm on the ground between them. That still doesn't explain what the difference is. The genius believes that his natural talent is enough, and when he fights he has no passion. The artist, however, he knows that whatever natural talent, or lack, thereof he has is not enough. When he fights he does so with everything he has, Harate explained, undoing the strings on the bundle to reveal 5 wooden swords. And this has what to do with me. Kenbutsu, like ninbutsu, taijutsu, denbutsu, or any other skill, is a lifetime pursuit, one that can never be set aside. What do you mean? Ino blinked, staring at him. She had a feeling that he was telling her that once she started with this training, she would never be able to stop. I mean, if you want to learn Kenbutsu, truly learn it, then you have to continue learning no matter what, Harate explained, looking down at the wooden swords as if considering something. For the Chunin exam, I will teach you some of the Unbu basics as well as some of my own style. After that, however, I won't train you until you decide. Decide what? If you are a genius or an artist. Coughing once more, he nodded at the wooden swords. These are specially designed practice swords. Okay, INO said, blinking. So, what do you want me to do? Select one, Harate explained. Each one is designed to resist the channeling of chakra, which will build your capacity. When you can channel enough chakra through one of these, you'll be allowed a specially designed sword that will work on your control. Shrugging, INO looked down at the swords, considering each one for a moment. Well, if she had to pick one, she would just get it over with. That decided, she reached out to grab a wooden sword with a ragged-looking blade, only to stop short. Frowning, she looked at another one and reached for it, but stopped yet again. Each time she reached to a sword, she would stop, until finally she crossed her arms and scowled. Each one had something that made her want to use it. It was like trying to choose between Sasuke and 4 other extremely cute guys. After several more minutes, she finally selected one, and amazingly enough, it felt natural in her hand. Good, Harate said, rewrapping the others. What do you mean good? Well, each practice sword has a different level of resistance. Most people would have just grabbed the first one they felt like. You hesitated and then decided on the one best suited to your needs. So, what now? INO asked, climbing to her feet as Harate did. It felt natural to hold the sword, but she really didn't know a whole lot, just whatever that clone had taught her. We has little over 2 weeks until the tune-in exam, Harate explained, walking over to a training post where he set the bundle down. Turning, he stared at her intently. I've spoken to Shino and to your father. They understand that we will spend this time training. Okay, so how long will that take? INO blinked, hefting her sword, trying to find a comfortable grip. Well, you seem to have some natural talent with a sword, so we'll spend 10 hours on Kenbutsu each day, then another 10 hours building up your chakra, Harate said before coughing. What? That's 20 hours a day. INO shouted, eyes wide in disbelief. There could be no way he could be serious. That would mean she would have 4 hours to sleep. And when the hell would she get to eat? To be ready for the tune-in exams, you'll have to train at least 3 times harder than normal, Harate responded seriously. If you don't want to learn, I suggest you leave right now. Fine. INO sputtered, eyes narrowing intently. There was no way she would back down now. Then let's begin. Feel the currents, focus your chakra, deep breath, Naruto muttered, concentrating as best he could, moving his hands into the Tori seal. Futon de topper. Seconds later, Naruto collapsed to his hands and knees, panting. That was his 20th attempt in the last hour. Well, at least this time you managed to knock over a tree, Anko said from behind him. I did. Naruto blinked and looked up, straining to see in the gathering gloom. There, indeed, where a large tree had been standing, was nothing. Jumping to his feet, Naruto thrust his fist into the air. Yes. Yay. Still kinda weak, Anko said, climbing to her feet. Come on. Let's get moving again. I'd rather not draw too much attention to ourselves. Right. Naruto said, catching his breath as he stretched before moving to retrieve his pack. Slinging it over his shoulder, he turned, following her into the trees once more and wondering whether they would get a chance to sleep. Well, he would probably spend any free time practicing anyway, so it was a moot point. Still, it would be nice to sleep in peace. Shaking his head, Naruto turned his mind to something else that had been nagging at him. This mission, something about it felt weird. Mostly because the further they went, the more irritable Anko seemed to become, and while she could be sadistic, vicious, and annoyed, she was never like this. Hey Anko. What? Well, I've been thinking, Naruto said slowly, glancing at the woman. There's something wrong about this mission. Anko didn't respond immediately, and Naruto started to fear she had decided to kill him. He even opened his mouth to say something when she beat him to it. Yes, it is wrong. Someone is turning us against each other, Anko said slowly, glancing at him. An enemy is easier to fight and kill if it's outside, but if it's inside, then it's much harder. Whatever the purpose of unity is, it can't be what they led others to believe. Huh. What is unity? Naruto asked, looking at her curiously. We're not sure, Anko answered with a shrug. We know that it's made up of mostly unbu with some normal jonin, but other than that we know almost nothing except that they recognize each other by a hand sign. What hand sign? A basic variation on the all-together sign, Anko supplied, demonstrating briefly. Most hand signs are common sense, used in small squads. So of course, Unity would use a common one, who would notice a slight variation. Oi, but how come we only know about that? Naruto blinked. Use your damn head, Anko snapped, glaring at him. These are not stupid genin or chunin, these are highly trained special operation ninja and field-tested jonin. They're almost impossible to break. Ibukai is the only one we has that's managed to break even one of them. Who? Morino Ibukai. He's in charge of the interrogation and torture division of the Unbu. Of the 5 divisions within Unbu, his is the most useful now, and with his complete understanding of the human mind, he'll get whatever information we need to know. 5 divisions. Anko sighed, as if restraining her instincts to snap at him. Yes. Inside the Unbu there are 5 divisions, which is to say, they're groups made up of people that specialize in certain aspects of the Unbu. Ho. In simpler terms, every ninja within Unbu specializes in one field. Some, like Ibukai, specialize in torture and interrogation. Harate, for example, was actually part of a group that specialized in information gathering and protection, which is probably why he was originally chosen as the sensor to ninja ideally suited to spying. Oh, Naruto said, then, after a moment stared at her. So. You were in the Unbu? Yes, Anko answered tiredly. Then, what did you specialize in? Assassination, Anko said, flashing a wicked grin at him. I am very good at it. Chapter 12, Loyalty and Honor. The Sandaime looked up from his paperwork at the polite, yet insistent, knock on his office door. Rubbing at his eyes he took a small breath, before setting his pen aside to the moment. Come in. A moment later, the door opened and he was greeted with the grey-uniformed shinobi known as Izumo. Hokage-sama, I'm sorry for the interruption, but Kiyoshi-san and Kakashi-san are here. I wasn't sure who you wanted to see first. Sandaime hesitated. Kiyoshi did has an appointment, but Kakashi might has an important reason to see him. Sighing, he leaned back in his chair staring at the ceiling in thought for several minutes before shifting his attention back to Izumo. Just send them both in, please. Yes. Hokage-sama, Izumo said, offering a polite bow before closing the door. A few moments later, the door reopened allowing both Kakashi and Kiyoshi to enter. Kiyoshi-san, how nice to see you again, the Hokage said pleasantly, getting to his feet as he motioned the man to has a seat. Ah, Sandaime-sama, you are looking well, the doctor responded just as pleasantly and doing as he was bidden, selecting a rather comfortable chair to relax in. I take it this isn't a social call? Sandaime asked, moving to the bay windows where he stared out at the village quietly. Sadly, no, I has Azumaki-san's test results back. The man paused, then continued. Perhaps the news can wait for a bit, you seem rather tired. Exhausted is more like it, Sandaime admitted with a chuckle. The Chunin exam is a very trying situation, Kakashi offered, leaning against a wall near shelf of scrolls. Perhaps, but I'd like to schedule you for an appointment. You're the doctor. Waving a hand, the Hokage turned and resumed his seat while fixing the man with his gaze. Now about Naruto's exam. Of course. You should know first of all, that I had to give him a complete physical. Kiyoshi paused, scowling slightly as if annoyed by something. Azumaki-san had one visit to the hospital about 6 years ago, and was turned away, that's 6 years worth of missing medical history. I understand, Sandaime assured the doctor, wondering why doctors always hinted at money so slyly. We have funds for cases like Naruto's. I was just informing you of his previous medical history, so you'd understand my surprise and shock, Kiyoshi responded before assuming an authoritative tone. I fully expected to see untreated and undiagnosed diseases, improperly set or healed bones. What I found. Hokage-sama, Azumaki-san is in perfect health. And that's what inspired your shock and surprise? Kakashi questioned, sounding amused. Even Sandaime had to admit that while impressive, what Kiyoshi had told him was hardly earth-shattering. Kiyoshi, however, shook his head, his tone growing even more serious. Hardly, though it is an impressive feat considering he has been without medical care for a large portion of his life. Then what was it? In all surface aspects, his body is normal, Kiyoshi said, lacing his fingers together. His immune system is much more efficient than anyone else's and his metabolism is abnormally high, but his reflexes, hearing, sight and other basic functions are normal. When you say abnormally high, Sandame prodded, leaning forward to rest his hands on the desk. I mean off the scale. Well, that would explain how Roka-san can go broke buying him ramen, Kakashi said, humor in his tone. I guess we don't have to worry about Naruto ever getting drunk, either. That is interesting, Sandame mused, leaning back in his chair. Not half as interesting as what else I discovered, Kiyoshi said, his tone actually growing excited. He heals at an impossible rate. I made a small incision on his finger for a blood sample and, when I went to place a bandage on it, the cut had already nearly finished healing. Really? Kakashi said with a casualness that was a bit too casual to be legitimate. Sandame, however, knew exactly what was going through the man's mind. It was a rather obvious thought: if such a healing ability could be harnessed for the Unbu, it would be invaluable. Of course, once word got out about this, then certain other groups within Konoha would want it as well. Sadly, the Sandium could see no immediate solution to that situation. Yes, and not only that, Kiyoshi said, oblivious to the military thoughts running through the room. His body, once it heals, does so in a manner to prevent the same level of injury from occurring again. Wait. Sandame held a hand up, blinking slightly. Could you repeat that? I mean, Kiyoshi said slowly, as if trying to contain his excitement, that not only does Azumaki-san heal extremely quickly, but his body adjusts itself to the level of injury he receives. So, if I were to, say, break his fingers for stealing, Kakashi said slowly, his voice almost gleeful at the thought, he would heal in such a way that I would have to use more force to break them again. Oh. Yes, I believe so, Kiyoshi responded, staring at the masked man in consternation. Upon noticing the rapid healing of the finger, I examined the shoulder that Anko-san reported had been injured. It was fundamentally different from the rest of his body. The flesh was thicker, the muscle fibers tougher. But such rapid healing must has a drawback, Sandame said after a moment, unless Anko was correct in her theory. Our bodies heal and grow by the process of cell reproduction, Kiyoshi explained, shifting his attention back to the Sandium. It's called cellular mitosis, and over time the cells accumulate too many mutations to the point of apoptosis for them, and for ourselves. So, the faster and more rapidly a cell divides, the faster they approach death, Sandame summarized, then arched an eyebrow at the smirk on the doctor's face. I take it that Naruto's cells don't function that way. Oh, his cells divide and reproduce, Kiyoshi said smugly, but Azumaki-san's cells don't mutate. They are perfect copies. Therefore, they never come any closer to apoptosis. So he has an advanced bloodline. Sandame breathed in relief, sitting back in his chair. It does meet the criteria, Kiyoshi answered before rubbing at his leg nervously. However, there is no record of such an ability, just no official name. I chose Tenkei-Kia, as it seemed to fit best. I agree, Sandame said after a moment of consideration. I trust you'll agree to be his primary physician. I've already taken care of that. Besides, as it stands, unless Tsunadeheim suddenly returns, I'm the only one remotely qualified to handle his medical care. Good, Sandame said. Then glancing at a suddenly anxious Kakashi, sat up. If there is nothing else. Actually, Kiyoshi said, leaning forward as well, there is one last thing. I know it's not normally part of an A1 level exam, but I ordered a hereditary test for him. What did you find? Sandium asked, his instincts on edge. Had they, by examining him, found a living relative? Was Naruto not an orphan after all, and merely an abandoned child? First, please remember that most of the medical records from the incident 12 years ago were destroyed, Kiyoshi said, as if heading for time. I can't tell you who his mother is specifically, but I can tell you that he seems to be distantly related to the Inuzuka. And one other person. How distant? Sandame suddenly snapped, eyes growing hard. Distant enough that the Inuzuka clan would has no way of knowing, Kiyoshi explained. Hokage-sama, I think his other relative could be more important. Frowning, the Sandame sat back in his seat, reaching up to cover his mouth in thought. If Kiyoshi thought the other relative was important, then he would accept that. This person is. Well, he was Slash's immediate family, though he did lack the Tenkei-Kia. Define immediate, Kakashi asked curiously. Immediate, as in he was the father. Kiyoshi said, sounding amazed. Note was as in past tense. So, who is it? Sandame asked, propping his elbows on the desk and lacing his fingers together. He stared expectantly at the doctor waiting, knowing that whatever was about to be said was going to make life a lot more difficult. Kiyoshi took a breath, as if what he was about to say was hard to admit. He closed his eyes for a moment then, opening them nodded. Yondem-sama. Kiyoshi said, tone reverent. Azumaki-san is the son the Yondem Hokiv. The Sandame remained perfectly still as if frozen, and then for all his dignity and extensive vocabulary said the only word that his stunned mind could conceive of. Fuck. Naruto. Related to Sensei. Kakashi half whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. Slumping, the Sandame lost himself in thought for several long minutes. He had noticed the similarities in a prince before, but had marked it off to his wishful thinking. There was the fact that the Yondem had been found in the nursery of Chironobori Hospital that night. It was so freaking obvious. Get Naruto in my office. This is. Kakashi didn't move for a moment, and then his gaze turned ominous. Anko. What about her? Sandame snapped. Kakashi, however, shook his head and turned heading to the door. Nothing. Please excuse me. Then, not waiting for an answer, he was gone, the door slamming behind him. Anko. MHHMM. The Jonin managed, not looking away from the village. Why didn't we just keep going? Naruto asked, shifting to look at her. Cause, Anko shrugged, finally glancing at him. We need to study the situation before we go rushing in. After all, we don't just have to worry about the villagers. Those rice fields are important too. Ho. They're just rice. Anko sighed and rolled her eyes, pointing at one of the fields being patrolled by a small group of genin. Fushimi isn't just a small village, they grow the highest quality rice in all of INO Kuni. Which means they are very valuable to the economy, since their rice is used for everything from sacramental sake to the tatami in the daimyo's castle. Oh. Naruto blinked, then scratched the back of his head. Oh. So why'd Susan decide on this place? It doesn't seem like a good place. It's not, Anko allowed, turning her attention back to the village. Normally this type of village is avoided by people in his situation, but I'm guessing he chose this place for a reason. Probably thinks that as long as he can threaten the fields, the samurai can't move against him. But what about? You know, how most of the samurai are actually ninja. Susan is unbu, Anko explained tiredly. To an unbu, even most field-tested jonin aren't much of a challenge in one-on-one combat. So, samurai are almost a joke, especially considering that Susan specialized in combat operations. Combat minus. It means he specializes at controlling teams and creating stratagems, Anko snapped, glaring at him. Which means that he'll be expecting ninja. Naruto was silent at that, looking worried, and Anko relaxed, allowing her eyes to finish the scan of the perimeter. Satisfied that they had indeed selected the best entrance point, she smiled. Oi, what are you smiling about? Naruto suddenly asked, his tone edged with tension. Because Susan is not Kakashi, Anko answered, chortling. He's expecting a full team, not just 2 ninja. He set up his perimeter under that assumption. So, to quote Yondem, attack where the enemy doesn't expect you. Anko smirked, shifting her weight on the branch as she sat down to watch the sunset. See, this road runs directly past the rice fields, and it has 2 teams, one at the entrance and one in the fields. Oh. But, if they have 2 teams, aren't they expecting something there? Not really, Anko said, waving a hand dismissively. After all, this is main entrance to the village. Nobody in their right mind would attempt to enter the village this way. You'd be spotted before you'd gotten near the walls, but because it's so obvious, you don't need good ninja there. Just ones that can see. Since Susan's forces are limited, he's probably put his weakest and least talented genin here to deter samurai and others away by a show of force. Right. Naruto deadpanned, sitting down next to her. So, while the stronger teams are guarding the other least likely entrances, this is the obvious choice. Anko explained, beginning to clean one of her nails absently. It means he's honestly not expecting anyone to attempt to come in through the front door. After all, it's common sense to enter through a back or side door. How is that obvious? Naruto demanded, looking thoroughly confused. All combat is based on deception, Anko grinned, looking at him. In other words, think outside the box. Naruto said in comprehension before blinking. So, what if he knows you'll think he wants you to enter from the back door, but will enter from the front door? It could be a trap then, right? Oh yes, Anko nodded seriously. But it's not. See, Susan's real ground operations strength was offensive strategy. This is defensive strategy, and he's mediocre at best in that. Now, if this was Kakashi, I'd still be looking for a way in since he looks underneath the underneath. Oh. Naruto frowned. So. You're going in now? No, Anko grinned sweetly at him. I'll sneak past those two genin teams in the morning. Night-time attacks are also a standard assumption. Okay, Naruto said, nodding in acceptance and then fell silent before glancing at her. What if I attacked the far side of the village at the same time? So you're just going to walk up in full view and pick a fight with the strongest teams? Anko asked before chuckling, amused that he was showing some aptitude for unique strategy. Well, that certainly is outside the box. Great. Pause. Anyway, miso ramen is better than seafood. Oi, and pork ramen is still pretty good, but some people say it's not that healthy, but it don't matter cause it tastes really minus. Naruto-kun, Anko cut him off, her tone overly sweet. Turning to face him, she arched an eyebrow. Would you like me to cut off your tongue or your balls? Good boy. Kakashi was not prone to rash action, it simply was not his nature minus, which was why when he first learned of Anko's decision in recruiting Naruto to her mission he had kept from sending teams after her. Instead he had decided to wait and speak with the Hokage, mainly because Naruto was one of only 2 rookie genin that Kakashi could see surviving this mission, and secondly because there was information about unity he needed to share. Sadly this was before he had discovered the connection between his sensei and the blonde prick that had stolen his precious. Now he was doing something extremely rash, not to mention dangerous. 3 days' worth of travel, condensed into only a few hours, it should have been impossible. Technically it was the Yondem had managed it, but that was because he was the single most powerful ninja who has ever lived. He had a jutsu specially designed for such a task. All Kakashi had was his genuinely large chakra capacity and a D-rank jutsu. The Sunshine no Jutsu, which was most certainly never intended for prolonged use or traveling such huge distances. It was designed for short trips, quick escapes and little else. Of course, being the genuine that he was, Kakashi had of course figured out the loopholes and used it as he pleased. The Sunshine no Jutsu balanced distance and elevation to chakra, so the further the distance and elevation, the more chakra required. Kakashi had judged that the safest distance would be no more than 100 feet at a time, which was proving more or less accurate. Landing on a branch after his latest sunshine, he paused hand pressed against the rough bark while he recovered for a moment. Body protesting, he looked up at the sky, pondering the only question that was really worth bothering with at this point. Why had nobody ever realized Naruto's relationship to the Yondem? It could be possible for the village at large to be ignorant of the Yondem's connection to Naruto. It could also be possible that the Yondem had even hid it from the Sandaime for obvious concerns. Still, that shouldn't have kept Freya from saying something. Freya, the one man who should have known, had acted as ignorant as anyone else. That was the real mystery, so far as Kakashi was concerned. If you knew that your most prized and beloved student had family, and that that family was now completely alone, it would only make sense that you see to their welfare. You would, at the very least, keep tabs on them. Yet, Freya, who had too has known, pretended that the Yondem was the last of his family. Kakashi supposed it was possible that because of the time frame of his departure, Freya could have been ignorant. Kakashi doubted that, however, and taking a moment longer he mulled over his memories, trying to glean any clues to the Sanin's actions. Finding nothing, Kakashi shrugged and prepared to move once more when a half-forgotten memory rose to the surface. It was at first glance a very superficial memory of a conversation between nurses shortly after the Yondem's funeral. Yet, they had mentioned 2 key elements: 1, that Freya had visited the nursery before leaving the village, and 2, he had muttered that it was to the best. Which meant that, whatever reason Freya had for not revealing Naruto's relationship was to the best. The best for whom or what was unclear. Could he have known about unity and their goals even then? Or was it something else? It was possible, Kakashi conceded, that Naruto could have been targeted by the Yondem's old enemies. But the Hokage would never have allowed anything to happen to the child. Hell, if it had been known, Naruto would have been adopted almost immediately, Stimga or not. So just what was the legendary ninja's reasoning behind keeping the family connection quiet? Then of course came a question he dreaded, until they knew why Freya had covered it up. Should Naruto even be told? Which would be crueler? Kakashi wondered silently, knowing or not knowing. Shaking his head, he set those thoughts aside, realizing that he was wasting time, and then with a burst of chakra and concentration he was moving once more. All that really mattered, Kakashi supposed as he passed yet another 100 feet and prepared for a nearly instantaneous continuation, was that he ensured Naruto's safety. After all, no matter the crime of stealing his precious book and giving it to that woman, Kakashi was honor-bound to keep his sensei's son alive. Taking a deep breath, he concentrated, and then faster than a heartbeat he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Slipping unnoticed into the village, past the genin, Anko wondered at the sheer simplicity of Susan's defense. Even if he was mediocre, he should have had a better understanding concerning defensive than just a handful of genin. There should have been traps at the very least, but instead she was able to almost brazenly walk through the front gate with the early morning sun. Hell, she probably didn't even need the Mizaigaku now that she was actually in the village. Not that she was going to stop using it, after all. If it was so simple to enter the village, there had to be something she didn't know about. So she made sure to keep an eye on the disgruntled villagers and anything that seemed out of place. Still, there was nothing to even suggest that this village was better guarded than she had first thought. Frowning, she decided that it was time to hit the best place to gather information, which meant ducking into an alley, so that she could release her Mizaigaku and hand herself into an unassuming female. That done, she stepped back out in the streets, blending into the crowd as she began her hunt for a bar. That proved more difficult than expected. This place seemed to have a lot of taverns for such a small village, but nothing like what she needed. Still, every village had the type of bar where the lowest of the low hung out, and nobody was particularly interested in who came and went. Eventually, she found such a place, and when she entered, it was indeed the type of dive she had been looking for. The lights were dim, the air stale with tobacco and spilt beer, and nobody bothered looking up when she entered. Satisfied, he slipped past the tables to the dirty bar, where she was greeted by the bartender, who gave her a rather lecherous smile. Anko dismissed that, however, more intent on the hand that her training told her was on its way toward her ass. Now, she could have reacted like Kurenai would, have grabbed the hand and broken it minus, or she could ignore it, which is exactly what she did. Which resulted in an expected dark glare from a common village girl. Never mind that she wanted to break his neck minus, then she turned her attention from the amused drunk and faced the bartender. So, what can I get you, pretty lady? Giving an even more loathsome glare to the bartender, she slapped her money on the counter. Sake. Strong. The bartender, picking up on her dangerous vibe, produced the bottle and cup in an instant, and then moved away toward a less threatening woman. Snorting, Anko grabbed her purchase and walked over to an isolated table where she dropped into her seat and poured herself a drink. Honestly, the things she did to Konoha. Anko wasn't sure how long she sat there watching and waiting, until she finally found her target. The target in this case was a boy with shaggy hair and dirty clothes, who hurried into the building and made a beeline for the bartender. Do you has any jobs for me, Hachiro-san? Yes. Actually. Benrai-kun. I need you to run to Susan-sama to me and ask him nicely if he would mind paying his bill today. Finishing her sake quickly, Anko climbed to her feet and left, ducking into a side alley to await the boy's departure. Seconds later, grumbling and hurrying, Benrai came hustling out of the bar and started off down the streets. Anko moved to the rooftops and set off after him, being careful to remain unnoticed. You call that a punch? Naruto shouted, sidestepping the blow from the frustrated-looking boy, and then ducked a kick from the other one. Come on, I thought you guys were ninja. It was an old tactic, one that Naruto had employed for years during his pranks, but that Anko had only recently named as the na approach. Regardless of what it was called, it worked perfectly. With each taunt the two genin he was fighting were getting sloppier and sloppier. Oi, anyone else feel a breeze? Naruto taunted once more, jumping this time to avoid a wild swing. Only this time the move backfired and he was caught in a surprise attack of kunai from one of the ninja. Both ninja seemed to watch in satisfaction as Naruto came back into contact with the ground, as a now limp form surrounded by a pool of blood. Then Naruto promptly went poof. Both of course seemed disturbed by that turn of events, at least until they were sent crashing to the ground by a sharp blow to the back of the head. Huh, guess it was just me, Naruto said, dusting his hands off before crouching down to riffle for you the two unconscious ninjas' pockets, taking their money. It wasn't like they needed it. Plus, all this fighting was making him hungry. Standing upright he blinked, feeling yet another couple of clones go poof, giving him the knowledge that, as of now, all the teams were neutralized. Grinning he chuckled, unable to believe that these stupid guys had all fallen for his challenges. Sweet Kami, only a total moron would actually walk up to each team and demand to fight them. Now a team of cave bunshine with heavy usage of the Mizaigaku was a different story. Shaking his head, Naruto stretched, looked up at the sky, then sighed. Well, now that he was done with the genin teams, he wasn't sure what to do. Shrugging, he walked to the edge of the wall and jumped to the ground, landing adroitly in the small alley created between the wall and buildings. Walking in a random direction, Naruto considered the unconscious genin and wondered at the ease with which he had won. Actually, in every encounter none of the genin had managed to even hit him, despite the fact that some of them were decently trained. It was almost like he was above them the same way that Anko was above him. Frowning, Naruto stopped in the middle of the alley and crossed his arms, considering that development. Well, if it was true, then that meant he'd has no trouble with the Chunin exams that Harate had told them about. It also meant he was that much closer to Hokage. Being this strong had its benefits. He was snapped out of his musing, however, by the sound of a footstep behind him. Spinning, Naruto avoided the first slash of kunai easily enough and spared a moment on his opponent, who appeared to be a year older and sporting a scratched forehead protector. Then the boy attacked once more, and Naruto avoided this one as well, but his stomach was knotting itself up, knowing without reason that this would have to end in bloodshed and death. Naruto didn't want to do it. He tried to think of some other way to end this, but he couldn't. On the next lunge, Naruto took a step forward while ducking to the right, while his arm swept back at an angle and drove the kunai into the side of the boy's throat. Naruto expected to see a training dummy like last time. This time all he saw was the other boy's face twisted into an expression of surprise and terror. He watched with what felt like a mixture of professional interest and loathing as the blood splattered the wall behind the boy and the way the body slumped from the blow and weight. Pulling his kunai free with a sicking plop, he cleaned it, then returned it to his forearm holster before looking at the body at his feet. "Why didn't you just leave me alone?" Naruto muttered, Anko's words from the forest in Kusa rattling around in his head. A moment later it dawned on him that he didn't know what to do with the body. Anko had never prepared him for this type of situation. He couldn't just leave it there, even he knew the problems with that, and he didn't want to just hide it under some boxes. That would just be wrong. After several minutes of trying to figure out what to do, while dealing with his feelings and what Anko had told him, he decided on his course of action. It took only a minute to create 2 cave bunshine and another few to tell them to take the body out of the village and bury it. Then, after they were gone with the body in tow, he turned and headed to the streets of the village. He paused, looking around at all the people, felt the wind on his face and the sun on his neck. It was odd. He had done exactly as Anko had taught him, had done the best thing he could for his mission, yet unlike Kusa he felt nowhere near the same amount of guilt. Like Anko had said, it was part of the job, and it was shocking just how little effort it took for him to hide what he did feel behind his mask of carefree innocence. He had been forced to take yet another life, but so what? They were ninja. They killed even Hokages. Oh, what now? Naruto mused, looking around in a careless way that would have done Anko proud. Then, snapping his fingers, he thrust a finger into the air and proclaimed in a voice that he usually reserved for drawing attention and expressing excitement. "Ramen." That shouted, he started off, a spring in his step and a smile stretched across his face. After all, when Naruto started a game of pretend, he never stopped. Anko moved quietly, with all of the stealth of the expert assassin that she was. Which was a nice change of pace, really. After spending so much time training Naruto, it was just nice to go back to what she was truly gifted at, her art. Even if she couldn't kill Susan, she could maim him, and at the very least, he got to practice. Grinning, she landed noiselessly on the roof across from a 3-story building, and watched the boy she had been following hurry up the stairs to knock. Her grin slipped a notch, however, when nobody answered, and the boy began beating on the door, before letting out a loud curse and storming off. For some reason, the lack of activity filled her with a sense of dread. Jumping from her perch, she landed adroitly on the street and approached the door, then checking to see if anyone was around, she used a kunai to pry the door open. Stepping inside the building, she hesitated, her finely tuned senses telling her that something was off in a bad way. Moving quietly, she checked the entire first floor, then slipping up the stairs, careful to not step on a board that looked as if it was about to creak. She checked the second floor. The rooms were clean, they even looked moderately lived in, but there was nobody around. Of course the genin were busy probably getting their asses kicked by Naruto, but still there should have been someone to answer the door. Even Susan himself. Frowning, she moved toward the bottom of the second flight of stairs, only 2 paws. Kneeling, she reached out and touched the dark liquid she had noticed, assuring herself that it was, indeed, blood. Her muscles tightened as she studied it, and then she looked up, straining her eyes to see the dim landing. Yes, there was a body up there, and from the angle, it looked pretty bad. Hurrying up the stairs, she found that the body belonged to a boy a year or so older than Naruto, whose throat had been slit. Eyes darting around the floor, she didn't find a hint of a fight, which meant this boy had been taken by surprise. Taking a moment to shut the now glassy eyes, she paused, studying his features. There was very little decay or smell. Plus, the blood was still wet, which meant this was a recent kill. Susan. Anko hissed at the realization that, if this was what she thought, then he was probably dead or dying. Relying on her instincts, she darted for the far room and then skidded to a halt, biting back a curse. There was Susan, lying in a pool of his own blood. Anko quickly assessed the room, noting that there had been a brief fight, probably a last-second attempt on Susan's behalf. Entering the room, she knelt, frowning. Whoever had done this knew she had been nearby and had purposely avoided assassination jutsu. This had been a professional job thought out to the last little detail, which meant an unbu who specialized in assassination. Which means, unity is a whole lot more dangerous than we thought. You has no idea. Anko reacted instantly, spinning around toward the voice as a kunai fell into her hand. When she realized it was Kakashi, there was a moment, in which she was about to kill him anyway. After all, there was no conceivable way that he should have been there minus, but she realized that if whoever had killed Susan had wanted to kill her, he would have just done it. Yo, the white-haired man said, giving a 2-fingered salute even as he entered the room completely. How'd you get here? They don't call me a genius for nothing, the masked commander remarked, reaching into his hip pouch and tossing her the small pack he took out. You know what to do, right? Yeah, Anko grumbled, putting her weapon away. I still want to know how you got here. I used the Sunshine no Jutsu, how else? The man remarked casually as he leaned against the wall near the window. The Sunshine no Jutsu. Anko repeated in disbelief. You traveled almost 100 miles using that. Impossible. The Sunshine no Jutsu only works over a short distance. Kakashi said, raising a finger, his single eye closing in a happy curve. It depends on the amount of chakra you has at your disposal, as well as the distance and elevation. Since I has a large amount of chakra and the elevation was level, all that really mattered was the distance. So, you used several shorter trips to cover the distance instead of just one long trip, which really would have been impossible. Anko said, then frowned. But doing that, you would have used up almost all of your chakra. Which is why I brought soldier pills. Oh. Anko smirked, turning to the body. You do know that if you take enough your balls will shrink, right? At the prolonged silence that greeted her statement, Anko chuckled, setting to work on the body. So did you see who got this bastard? No, Kakashi said, his tone hinting at annoyance. I arrived about 10 minutes ago, right around when Naruto picked his first fight. Oh. Speaking of which, Kakashi responded casually, what exactly has you been teaching that boy? Why? Did he scare you? Anko asked teasingly, busy fingerprinting the body for later identification. I ask because that's not a genin, Kakashi said blandly. That's a ninja being trained specifically for assassination. Heavy style from the way my Sharingan kept losing track of him during the fights, my Zeigaku no Jutsu, and I think he tried the Kanashibari no Jutsu. Oh, guess the Shiheipo Shuriken and Futon, Daytopper were a bit much to use in the village, Anko muttered as she put the fingerprints away and began to place seals on the body for transportation. Did you get to see his mysterious grass jutsu? He won't let me see it at all. No, Kakashi said. How'd he learn a grass jutsu? The Shaoshi of Kusa gave him something that looked like a Thutsu scroll. Anko explained with a shrug. Well, still, nothing you've taught him should be taught to a genin. He's got a knack for it, Anko explained without really explaining while turning to face the copycat ninja as she sealed the body into a scroll that she tossed to him. You never did tell me why you came all this way. Well, Kakashi leaned forward, I light with a unique seriousness. Confidentially, Anko, you never asked why I came all this way. Anko blinked, then slapped her forehead. You've just been waiting to say that to someone, haven't you? Maybe, Kakashi admitted in amusement before turning serious. As for why I'm here, it concerns unity and the Yondem's legacy. The Yondem's legacy. Anko repeated before blinking. What does that have to do with unity? Wait, how exactly do you know even more about unity? It's complicated, Kakashi said, crossing his arms. Basically, I set a variation of the canary trap and we stumbled across a unity member. Who? Shiden from the Tentu Lao department. Kakashi explained darkly. Shiden, why am I not surprised? Anko said, climbing to her feet, almost unsurprised at the fact that the spy would be from the unit in Unbu that specialized in information. So, what exactly are they after and how's it involve whatever this Yondem legacy is? Their primary goal is to unite the country of fire and Konoha under one banner, one ruler, the Hokage. Well, that's a give me. Anko remarked. True. But they're also targeting all relatives of current and former Hokages. Kakashi explained, narrowing slightly. Shiden didn't know why or for what purpose, but somehow I doubt it's to give them sweets. Maybe to use the vast public and what little politic weight they carry. Anko suggested with a frown. After all, getting relatives of former Hokages to join behind your goal of unification would be a good idea. Possible, Kakashi admitted. It's also possible to control the Hokage by using them as hostages. The Sandaime would be unable to act against them if they were threatening his grandson, or one of the former Hokage's relatives. Yeah, Anko scowled before sighing. But you still haven't told me what the Yondem's legacy is or how it affects unity or why it brought you all the way out here. Cave Bunshine no Jutsu Kakashi version. The masked Jonin said, creating 6 cave bunshine before sending them out to secure the building and apply anti-spying seals. That finished, he cleared his throat and fixed her with a serious gaze. I'll tell you. But you cannot mention this. Ever. Not even to Naruto. Fine, fine, Anko waved a hand, serious though she was hiding it with nonchalance. What could be this important that the Unbu commander would go to this much trouble to secure an entire building? Also, why did he forbid her to tell this to Naruto? What could he have to do with what she was about here? The Yondem Hokage had a relative, Kakashi said slowly, his voice tight. A son. Because of unity and the unsecure nature of this building, the only way to refer to him was the Yondem's legacy. Whoa, Anko said, realizing why he had been so anxious to get her and would seal the building so securely. This was major news and it was personal. The Yondem had been important to the masked ninja. So, he's in the village. For the moment, Kakashi answered, crossing his arms and tilting his head. You do remember where they discovered the Yondem, correct? Ho. Yeah, at Chironobori Hospital, the one that was attacked after the QB- Anko paused, a frown marring her features as suddenly everything he had said and she knew connected at breakneck speed. Wait. He was in nursery. And Naruto minus, but they couldn't minus. During the exam, Kiyoshi-san ran the heredity test. Kakashi fixed her with an intense stare. We know Naruto's mother obviously had has died at birth and the father was obviously in the battle against the QB-. And the only logical reason the Yondem was in the nursery was to see his son. Anko finished in a daze. Oh. Fuck. That's what the Hokage said. Well, at least nobody knows, right? For the moment, Kakashi agreed. Hokage-sama will probably suppress the test until Naruto's been told, and I'm going to see if I can talk him out of revealing it until we can find fiery air or stop unity. Anko nodded in understanding and then snapped her fingers, smirking as she remembered what had purported the heredity test in the first place. So, was I right? Kakashi sighed in response and lowered his head, which Anko correctly took as admitting that she was right and Naruto has a bloodline ability. Aha. I knew it. We should get back to Konoha. Not until you admit I was right. Anko said gleefully, then watched as he shook his head and pushed off the wall, heading to the door. Pouting, Anko went after him, her voice excited. Say it. Kakashi, you bastard. Say that I was right. Here you go, Naruto. The blonde in question grinned, stacking his currently empty bowl in the second stack he had started. Bowing, he offered a thank you and dove into yet the next serving of the steamingly delicious ramen. True, while it was not Ichiraki ramen by any stretch of the imagination, it was still some pretty damn good stuff, and they had over 99 varieties. So far the first 75 had been great, and as he slurped his latest serving down he rounded that number up to 76. Looking up he grinned at the amused husband and wife, Tsubaki Toshiro and Amy newlyweds who wanted 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl minus, and saluted with his chopsticks. Oi, another winner. Haha. Toshiro said, kissing his wife's cheek happily. You were right, dear. Of course, Amy said, grinning as she turned to the menu. So, let's see. We only has 23 more to go, so which one do you want to try next, Naruto-kun? Slurping the noodles up he grinned at the woman deep in thought. I'm not sure, how about minus? Why am I not surprised? A new voice suddenly said from the entrance. Naruto turned, eyes widening slightly as he spotted Anko and then Kakashi. Still he couldn't help but grin at the woman. She was after all sort of smirking. Anko. Yeah, hey runt. The jonin returned casually, eyeing the 2 stacks of empty bowls. Yeesh. Did you eat everything on the menu? Not yet, Toshiro said happily from behind the counter. He's only got 23 more to go. Oi. Wait a minute. Naruto suddenly interjected, blinking as he looked at Kakashi once more. What's he doing here? His job, Anko said blandly, crossing her arms. So I take it you finished yours. Ho. Naruto blinked then grinned, slapping down his remaining noodles. Yeah, no biggie. Ho, Anko. I didn't know you had enough money to afford all this. Kakashi suddenly interjected, as if finally noticing the bowls. Oi, I paid in advance. Naruto interjected, glaring at the man slightly. Shouldn't you be out reading a naughty book in public? Kakashi looked at him. Naruto looked back. Kakashi stared. Naruto shivered, feeling the killing intent radiating from the man. So, anyway, your run time to get a move on. Anko said as if she was perfectly oblivious to the murderous feelings Kakashi was sending to Naruto. Or www, do I gotta go? Naruto pleaded, his attention suddenly diverted away from his imminent death. Seeing her glare he sighed, turning back to the slightly disappointed-looking couple. I gotta go, guys. But, I'll be back to try those other 23 flavors. I promise. Amy smiled and leaned over, kissing his forehead fondly. We'll be here, Naruto-kun. Toshiro nodded his agreement as Naruto finished his noodles and then joined Anko and Kakashi as they left the ramen stand. None of the ninja in question said a word, just walked almost as if they were a family of some sort, until they were beyond the walls of the village. Okay, so where'd you get the money for all that ramen? Anko asked curiously. Hey, those genin I beat up. Naruto answered brightly, figured it was the least they could do for me cause I worked up in a ptate you wouldn't believe. I know, I can remember this one time in Waterfall, when I was still in the UNBU and I had to take out this missing nin and his groupies. Sweet Kami, I was starving by the time I was done and well they weren't using their money anytime soon, Anko said grinning. My captain said that was a bad habit though, at least, until I bought him a book. Which she promptly destroyed. Kakashi deadpanned. Don't let her fool you, Naruto. Anko has no sense of taste when it comes to literature. Naruto blinked, staring between the 2 older ninja and then frowned. It took a few minutes to put the conversation into context, but suddenly he realized that these 2 had known each other for a long time and that he could picture just what kind of book it had been. He was even preparing to make a joke until he realized that they were not heading to the captured genin. Oi, where are we going? Back to Konoha. The samurai can handle the genin, Kakashi answered with a pleasant upturning of his eye. Unless you want to miss the Chunin exams. And risk having that Yamanaka girl castrate you. The more I hear about that girl the more I like her. Anko interjected with obvious amusement. Naruto however was just staring with wide-eyed horror at the concept of what he was now facing. It wasn't bad enough he had Anko trying to make him less than a man, but now apparently he had to worry about INO wanting to do the same thing. That was honestly the last thing he needed. 2 Paishko girls. Relax, Naruto. She prefers verbally castration from what I hear. Unlike Anko. The white-haired man said in amusement. True, Anko grinned, looking at Kakashi and Naruto in that disturbingly pleasant way she had. Want me to demonstrate? Both men shook their heads no. Rapidly. Looking terrified. Anko just pouted. That's it to this part. If you enjoyed it then like, share and subscribe to the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlist. Hope you would like them too.